Good evening. This is October 1st. It's a regular session of Town Council. I'm calling the meeting to order, and we've got some wonderful guests who will be here this evening speaking. But before we get started, Rhonda, you want to do roll call?
Butler,
Here.
Circus,
Here.
Matson,
Here.
Shank.
Here.
Good.
Goods in Italy. Lucky person. Okay. Do I have anyone in the public who would like, Reed, you want to come on up? You know the drill. The rest of us make a comment to Town Council. It's so good to see you again.
Hi, I'm Reed Lewis. I am on the marketing board and special events board, but I am here on behalf of myself and not from that. But I've heard rumors that not everyone on this council is aware of the massive housing crisis that we have for employees in our town. So I want to just put a face behind the business community saying, please listen to what we are saying. We need more housing. I know there are people in this town that do not want to build anymore, that do not want the town to get busier, but the bottom line is if we don't have employees, this entire place goes down, and I don't think anybody here wants to see that happen. I'm happy to answer questions if people have questions about it, but it's easy for people to get jobs in Basalt, Carbondale, Glenwood, and beyond that pay almost as much as up here now. So there are no people to fill the jobs that we have, and people aren't opening businesses for that reason, and the ones that are open are struggling to make it work, and we're about to have another couple hundred jobs come online. So that's my shtick for today.
Any questions at all for Reed? Reed, how hard is it to employ? I know the struggle in the industry I represent. It's pretty darn hard. I mean, we go 3 and 4 months with a vacancy.
It's just, I mean, you can put ads out, and sometimes you don't even get any response, and it's like you're in an echo chamber wondering. I mean, I've tapped all of my friends of those people, my employees' friends, their friend. I mean, it's really hard to figure out how to do it, and most people are already piecing together 2, 3, even 4 jobs to survive in the valley. So people are already tapped out. I mean, I don't know, maybe we should require all the retired folks to pick up a couple shifts.
Reed, where do you see these couple hundred jobs that you refer to?
Well, we have a 100-room hotel opening across the street, so that's
That's a place to start.
several. You've got
That's the obvious place, but I didn't want to make an assumption
right.
that's what
Well,
you
and then
were
you've
thinking
got
about.
people like Dave Dugan who have 3 and whatever, all the different conglomerations of partnerships that they have, but they've got 3 to 4 restaurants down there that when they're busy, they need 150, 200 people, and that they've not been ever fully staffed, I don't believe. There are constantly signs on the mall. I can't speak as much for the center. I'm not down here quite as much in intimacy that I am on the mall, but it's continuous, and it will continue to be continuous, especially as our population in our current housing ages. People move on, and they go from sort of the service industry to the back of house service industry to often starting their own businesses or not working as much because they're nearing retirement. And there was a survey done years ago where the town emphatically said, especially the young people said, we don't want to kick the older crowd out. They've put their roots here and made this place work for as long. So I don't think that's an answer at all. But you have people that were here in the 70s and 80s that aren't waiting tables anymore. And I mean, just since I've been here, Mountain View has gone from sort of a raging, everyone was 30 or under, to everyone is 35 or older. And we just don't have, I mean, there's exceptions to every rule, but we just don't have that influx of the 20-somethings that we used to have. They are moving directly to sort of the towns that people end up in. I'd say secondarily, but now it's their first choice to move right from Michigan to Carbondale rather than right to the ski town. And when you can make as much money working there, why come up here? The housing is one of the things that we can do to tip the scale to keep quality workers up valley.
Okay, we're gonna have our housing director here later on
Right,
tonight,
Reggie's here.
so.
Okay.
Betsy's over here.
Thank you for
Thank
listening.
you.
Thank
Stay
you,
in touch.
Reed.
Let us know what's going on in terms of employment and housing. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Public comment? If not, let's move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any item you want pulled out? I will not be here next Monday, so I know I was tentative.
I'm sorry?
I will not be here next Monday.
Thank you.
Just on the minutes
Yes.
from 8/6, it said all council members were present, but it only listed in Good and Shank.
I'm sorry, which minutes?
8-6.
8/6?
Sorry, I had a technical difficulty on that meeting. We didn't get it recorded, so
And
I
if you could-
apologize.
If you could look at line 32, the first word just needs to be capitalized. Anything else?
I will be out on December the 17th.
Okay. Okay, Rhonda, were you able to pick that up?
Yes.
Okay. Any other corrections or changes to attendance? Okay, we have a motion and a second for the consent agenda. All in support, say aye.
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 I said aye.
Aye.
Sorry, I have my hand in
Okay.
front of my face.
Okay.
Just trying to get my agenda to pull up.
Unanimous approval. Okay, we're going to move
Cindy
on to a
connects
presentation. Nan Cindy. Um, Nan doesn't need a lot of introductions at all. She has been running our wonderful Pitkin County Community Fund and Health Services and everything else she does. Yeah, for
Thanks,
years.
Marky.
Thank
Yeah.
you, and welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Nan Sundin. I'm the Director of Human Services for Pitkin County. And Marky and Rhonda asked me to come up today to talk to you about the dedicated property tax ballot issue for the Healthy Community Fund. And the reason why I brought Greg Poshman is because I can speak to you as statements of fact on the job, but as you all know, as a result of campaign finance, I can't endorse or oppose any particular issue while I'm on the job. So I'm going to tell you what the Healthy Community Fund is briefly, and then I'll turn it over to Commissioner Poshman. So the Healthy Community Fund is a dedicated property tax that supports county, nonprofit, and community nonprofits for health and human services and cultural and recreational treasures in our community. It's been in place since 2002 when the recession of 2001 left Pitkin County without the ability to support the nonprofits as they build our social safety net. So it was originally passed in 2002 with 71% of the vote for 5 years at 800,000. In 2006, it was passed again with 70% of the vote for another 6 years, and it was passed again in 2011, 2 years early for 2013 to 2018. It's always been a short-term property tax with the idea that much of it is discretionary and it allows the voter the choice to renew or not to renew. The tax will be sunsetted at the end of this year unless it's renewed. So on August 28th, the Board of County Commissioners passed a resolution submitting to the electorate the ballot issue dedicating the property tax. And the resolution 59, 2018, it outlines the governance and parameter of the fund. Generally, it's funding about 70 agencies, and there's a division of how the money is to be distributed, with 22% going to public health, 12% to senior services, 46% to health and human service nonprofit agencies, and another 12% to groups that we call community nonprofit nonprofits that are working to improve the quality of life, like the Ski Club and Spellbinders and some environmental programs. The agencies that apply for funding to the county need to fit into 5 main goals: family and youth well-being, physical health and public health, mental health and substance abuse prevention, the well-being of seniors, cultural treasures, and environmental quality. The county commissioners decided to increase the fund by $750,000 in this ask and extend it for 9 years. I think Greg will talk a little bit about the reason for the increase, but primarily things that you all know, that mental health and substance abuse are critical issues that we've been underfunding. Integrated healthcare, an issue that we've been underfunding. Homelessness, as well as some of the demands of public health are the reasons for the increase. A little under 95% goes directly to the services, and the county only uses a little bit to administer the fund, and the administration is generally around grant management, contract management, site visits, and we require outcome measures that need to be produced by every agency asking for more than $10,000. So there's a strict oversight of all of the grants, as well an opportunity to ensure that we're maximizing the benefit of the dollars. There's a citizen grant review committee that reviews all of the grants. We have 5 adults and 2 high school students that sit on that committee, and they do a rigorous and thorough review of all the grant applications and make decisions based on all the applications instead of sort of any favorites or one-on-one. So that's what the Healthy Community Fund is, and I'll let Greg talk to you a little bit about the BOCC's interest in supporting it.
Thank you all. It's really great to be up here. You have such a quiet, calm room here. It's like I'm really envious. Not that ours is noisy. There are some other ones that are more raucous in the valley, though. So it's really nice to come up and see how civilized things are in Snowmass Village. So yes, I can encourage you all to vote yes in favor of 1A. The thing that strikes me most is that the money that goes through the Healthy Community Fund, and I came onto it as a skeptic, I've got to say. When I first came on, I was skeptical when I first heard that we were giving all this money to 70 organizations, and you look at the names, and sometimes you see redundancies, and you think, well, what's going on here? What I've come away since then, after examining it and listening to the other commissioners and to Nan and crew talk about it, is that yes, we do have great oversight. There is no redundancy that would be easy to pick out. The scrutiny this fund is given publicly by our advisory committee as well as by the commissioners themselves was very important to me, because I had to demonstrate that I wasn't changing my mind about it for any frivolous reason. The nice thing also to understand about this fund is that it's a $3 million fund roughly, but it leverages about $60 million in actual grants that come through and funds that come to us. So it's like we're putting in 3 and we're getting 60 back. It's a great thing for the community. What I've found also, speaking to other communities, is that we're the envy. Not every community has something like this, and they wish they did, because what we have is something of a safety net that is taking care of us in our community in a myriad of ways that other places don't have. And in the face of state and federal funds being cut back or spread thin, we have the ability to take up some of that slack. And these are for essential services for the people who take care of us. So the fund it's ubiquitous, and that you find it everywhere in the community. Nan mentioned it briefly, and I always bring it up in every meeting. We do support some of the environmental groups that have come forward, and I understand in polling about the fund, that's been incredibly important. People in the community want us to help some of the organizations like ACES and Wilderness Workshop and others who are actually doing solid work on the ground to protect our natural resources. And they're doing it because the Forest Service, in some cases, has walked. They just don't have the funds. So who's stepping in? Our open space program steps in. Open space doesn't get funds from this, but what I'm seeing is that this fund contributes to the health of the community in so many ways. I went off my script there. I lost my notes, so I'm trying to read this. I'll be quick. Strict oversight. The services that this fund provides are from birth to death, families, coworkers, community at large, and also some of the services we're providing now with this fund are actually mandated by the feds in the state, but they're not giving us any money to do it. So the equivalent of the ask we're asking for now, or maybe a bit more, $800,000 a year, is actually mandated. If this fund doesn't pass, it's coming out of the general fund anyway, and we're going to have to figure out how to make it work. So we're on the hook for 800 of this already through Fed and state, and then local. We have local mandates. We have intergovernmental agreements with several organizations. We're obligated to put money in. So if it doesn't pass, it's going to be. Doesn't just go away. It's not like something that was a great idea that went away. It's more like this is going to be a big hit for us. What else can I tell you here? I think I've hit it all there. So I'm just going to encourage everyone to vote yes on 1A, and it'd be great to see the town council. I think you're doing a proclamation today. Hopefully that will go forward, and you'll get behind it and join the Pitkin County Commissioners, and I'm not sure who else has signed on. Basalt and Aspen have got on also. So we're all in this together. We're going to make this thing work. Thanks.
George, did you want to come up?
Thanks. I wasn't going to speak on this, but I couldn't resist because it's so important for everyone in our community and our county. The other benefits for the nonprofits, and many are small nonprofits, they don't have very large budgets. And even though we may give perhaps what may amount to about 4% of their total budget, they are able to then leverage that when they are going out to grants, showing that they have support from Pitkin County. And that's really important for these nonprofits because everyone has to go out for grants. So this gives them that opportunity to say, we've got some matching dollars. The other thing, as Greg talked about, if this does not pass, even though the county is obligated by state statute to perform and provide certain services, the level of those services will not be the same as with the Healthy Community Fund. So those level of services will be diminished to the minimum amount that we have to provide given our budget, and certainly all the other nonprofits will not be able to continue to provide the extent of the programs and services they are doing now with the support of the Healthy Community Fund. So those are two really important points. Thank you.
Can I add one more little thing? It occurred to me the other day that there probably is no one in this community who isn't touched in some way by this fund and by the various organizations. You'd have to be, locked in a basement somewhere to really not get any benefit from this. So it is very, what we can say, it's broad throughout the community.
As a nonprofit in my day job, I will tell you that your local hospice would not exist without the Healthy Community Fund and other grant dollars such as Snowmass Village. And like you said, Greg, we leverage the dollars coming from governmental entities to apply for grants on the Front Range. So I know quite well the importance of this fund and has wonderful oversight, has special meaning. And then on another side of my hat, I sit on the Public Health Board for Pitkin County, and I cannot believe the state mandates as they continue to roll forward with very, very little money coming from the state or federal government to meet those requirements. So needless to say, I'm 100%, probably 150% supporter of this fund. I'll see if other people have.
I have a couple of questions. Nan, what was the reasoning and the basis behind changing the term from 6 years to 9?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. The reasoning for extending it to 9 years, there are a couple of them. One is that the Healthy Community Fund provides 3-year partnership grants, which means agencies that have proven track record can on funding for 3 years. And a 9-year term allows for 3 partnership cycles. What we have found now at the end of the 2 partnership cycles of 3 years is that it doesn't allow for enough time to make more systemic change around collaboration in services. That, and also the helpers, the people who run these agencies, are primarily working in campaign to support the campaign. And so the 9 years gives them a little bit longer to do the work that we really want to support them doing.
Okay, so it's hard to get what they'd like to accomplish done in the 6-year cycle.
Yes.
Okay.
As
Yes.
soon as 6 years is done, by the time you do your
No,
first
no.
3 years, I can tell you.
Yeah,
You're working on another.
if you've been in a
partnership.
nonprofit,
Yeah.
you know that it just, things don't happen as fast as you would like them to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What was the other, I know the other question. Often in these kinds of situations, our residents, taxpayers, voters, like to know that there's a local, a Snowmass Village local connection. So could you give us some examples of organizations that are working in Snowmass for this community that are funded through this community fund?
Sure. I would take a guess that almost all 70 are impacting Snowmass Village residents, workers, and tourists, by the way. I think some examples would be hospice. They're in every town. The Buddy program has buddy pairs with some of the between adults and vulnerable youth in Snowmass Village. We have mental health programs that are providing services in Snowmass Village. And the ski club brings, my daughter was in the ski club for years and came up to Snowmass Village and skied here. So taking both Snowmass Village children as well as bringing children from the valley to Snowmass Village. There are so many spellbinders, and the Aspen Family Connections, where we just started a school resource center in the Aspen schools, and so children from Snowmass and their families are getting extra support to help them be successful in school.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
In my conversations with our police chief, he said that we have a grant for about $300,000 that I believe goes to your organization. Is that right?
I'm guessing that Brian was talking about the mental health collaborative.
Yes,
Right.
that's-
And is that funded?
So what we did with Healthy Community Fund dollars is we went to the hospital in the city of Aspen and other partners, and we combined our local funding and had an RFP for mental health. That's one project, but also with Town of Snowmass Village in particular, we do have an intergovernmental agreement for detox services. So we took county money, hospital, city, Snowmass Village, and Basalt funding, and we did a RFP and chose a vendor to provide detox services. So those are ways that we use the funds collectively for greater impact. So we have a 5-bed detox at the Health and Human Services building in Aspen.
Okay,
I'm
good.
sure that's probably what he was talking about.
Yeah, all right, that's good information. Let's see. I think that's all I have, thanks.
Okay. Thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda will be, George, I think I'm going to have you come on up. Or do you guys want to take the resolution one at a time?
Yeah, let's take the resolution.
Let's take the resolutions. Do I have a motion for resolution, this is
30.
30. And it's ballot question number 1A. Do I have a motion?
I'll make
for-
a motion for resolution number 30, series of 2018, ballot question 1A. Is that what it is?
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Just on line 20, youth is listed twice.
Didn't see that. Line 20?
Oh, got it. Okay. With that correction, are you?
Yep.
All in support, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much. It passed unanimously. Let's move on to the raft ballot initiative. And George Newman is here to talk about the raft initiative, and this is resolution number 29. As most of you know, George is chair of the Rafter Board and working very, very hard on this campaign.
Great, thank you, Mayor, council members. So as you know, you've seen over the last 2 years many different presentations on Rafter 2040. And Rafter 2040 came about to determine long-range planning for an integrated transportation system. And there was a tremendous outreach to all of our member community jurisdictions from Aspen to Newcastle, as well as Pickens County and Eagle County. And from that input from all those communities, each community came up with sort of their list of needs based on their constituents and how they feel that Rafter could be more beneficial to help them. So the Rafter Board took in all that information. We got input from all of our elected boards as we prepared where we would go from there. From that discussion, from those plans, we came up with a budget to try to meet all of those projects and all those needs. And this past summer, the board unanimously passed a resolution to go before the electorate for a mill levy, a property mill levy of 2.65 mils. What that equates to for a residential homeowner whose real property is at $500,000 market value, that equates to $6.75 a month or $81 a year. For commercial property of $1 million of real market value, that equates to $64 a month or $768 a year. So what will happen if 7A is successful? What that will mean is that we will be able to not only maintain our current level of services, but we will be able to meet the needs and demands of all our member jurisdictions. That includes increasing the frequency of our local service as well as our BRT year-round, on weekends, and in the evenings. And that's really important. Everyone is asking for that. It also will provide park and ride expansions. It will provide for infrastructure enhancements and pedestrian safety enhancements. It will provide for regular service of our very popular Rio Grande Trail for our down valley jurisdictions. It will help for some funding for their Lova Trail, which goes through from Glenwood to Newcastle, which is really important for that community. For Snowmass specifically, what it's going to provide is the ability to maintain the current frequency that you are enjoying through the funding through ELTC to be able to meet the BRT on 15-minute intervals. It will provide funding to help assist if and when you decide to go for to build a Snowmass Transit Center. It should provide opportunities to look at expanding a WeCycle program here in Snowmass Village, e-bikes specifically. That's important for a lot of the other communities. And, you know, riding on, just following Reed's presentation on the dire need for housing, which we all have, we may not be able to house every employee. It just may not be possible in our communities. So what we have to do is rely on a transit system that is able to transport our workforce. Pickens County imports about 66% of our workforce. I'm not sure what the percentage is coming up to Snowmass, but I'm sure it's a good percentage because when I ride the bus into town at the intercept lot, I see lots of people coming on and getting off, going up to Snowmass or coming from Snowmass going to Aspen for their jobs. So it's a critical component. And as the Mid-Valley and Down Valley population continues to grow, and by 2038, our state demographers are showing population growth of about 40%, that's going to put even more pressure in terms of having a transit system that's going to be able to bring those guests and those employees up to our communities. Because otherwise, the competition to be able to recruit and retain employees is going to become that much more difficult when one can work closer to their home. So it has tremendous economic impacts. It certainly has tremendous environmental impacts. RAPTA takes about over 1,000 cars off the road a day coming up and down the valley. And you can just imagine what that congestion would be like without RAPTA. RAPTA is looking at putting in an order of, with the city of Aspen, of 8 electric buses this fall. That will be the first time we'll be moving towards electric buses. They're going to be quiet. They're going to be environmentally friendly, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions that we all are concerned about. So those are all benefits. What happens if this does not pass? Well, RAPTA's ability to maintain its current level of service will probably be diminished by about 20% over the next 5 years. It won't impact our ability to purchase buses because we have to have buses to have a transit system. Buses are expensive. They run for anywhere from $500,000 for diesel to over $1 million for electric. RAPTA was just able to get a $2.2 million grant from the FTA, and it's going to be announced tomorrow down in Glenwood. And that will be used for some replacement of some of our obsolete buses. Great. Those grants, either state or federal, are becoming harder to come by. They're becoming much more competitive, and RAPTA needs to have within their capital reserves an ability to provide some matching funds, similar to what we just talked about with the Healthy Community Fund. So that's always a challenge. RAPTA's revenue is predominantly comes from sales tax. 52% of RAPTA's revenue comes from sales tax. You know how volatile sales taxes are. Mm-hmm. You know, if we come to another recession, sales taxes drops, RAPTA will have to dip into their capital reserves. We need to have a steady source of funding that will provide the ability to continue to not only maintain our current level of service, but to be able to expand and enhance based on the needs and demands of all of our member jurisdictions. We can't increase our sales tax by state statute. Sales tax for transit agencies are capped at 1%. Some of our member jurisdictions are already at that point. So that would not be a fair and equitable way to try to continue to fund RAPTA. A property tax is the only viable way to do that. So, well, with that, there's information that is available online with rapta.org. The public can go on that website. They can find out more information in terms of the benefits, what RAPTA is currently doing, what are the challenges that RAPTA will face over the next 20 years. And that I'll answer any questions you have, but I would strongly ask that you support and endorse RAPTA 7A. Right now, Pitkin County, the BLCC will be passing a resolution next week at our regular session. The town of Assault will be passing a resolution next week, as well as the city of Aspen. Town of Carbondale has already passed a resolution, as has the town of Newcastle. Eagle County Commissioners will meet and pass that, I believe, tomorrow as well. So we are all in this together. We all share the same values. We all need the services that RAPTA provides, not only now, but we have to look 20 years in the future. And for Snowmass, you know, when you look right across the street in terms of what's being built up there, the number of employees that you'll be needing to be able to successfully run a resort, I think you're going to need to rely on a transit system that's going to be able to deliver those people.
Great.
Thanks, George.
Come on, Greg, come on.
I'll be brief. I thought I can provide the anecdotal comments. George's thorough assessment here. I'm an alternate on the RAFTA board, so I've been spending a lot of time down there as well. I just wanted to point out that Brush Creek Road, being the busiest county road we have, as you know, is often very hard to get on and off of as you're pulling in for all the cars. And if we had to reduce service, I can't imagine that, but any reduction or even leveling off in service as the base village at Snowmass grows, it's hard to imagine how things would improve. When I'm down at the intercept lot, I see a lot of people pouring off and on the Snowmass bus from their connections. And I'm also seeing and hearing a lot about how the next generation is a generation that's not getting cars. Some of them aren't getting driver's licenses. They're not needing insurance. They've liberated themselves from automobiles, and they rely on other forms of mobility, including transit. So as we're looking at the commuters coming up to service the community, we're going to see people who absolutely are going to rely on other forms of mobility. And it's exciting to think about what's possible. I would love to challenge everybody watching this and everybody here, if they haven't used RAFTA very much, to give it a couple of weeks and see how much it liberates you with your free time and saves money. I think you can probably save about the equivalent of a vacation, an annual vacation, if you just stop pumping that money into your car and get on the bus. So I'm hoping that everyone gets infected with this idea that you don't need to take 2,500 pounds of steel and Naugahyde with you everywhere you go. Just take the bus. Thanks.
Okay, do we have questions? Anyone questions? I can tell you, ever since we did that 15-minute down to the intercept lot, makes all the difference in the world in terms of my daily commute. So, and what's always interesting, the buses coming up Valley and go through the intercept, those buses are standing room only. So that's our commute to work. Any questions?
No, but I wanted to make a comment.
Yeah.
I recognize that not everybody uses the bus, but I think that regardless of if you use the bus or not, you have to understand the impact that it will have on our resort town. I think one of the reasons why people love this area is because they don't have to rent a car, and they can get to and from Aspen to all four mountains for free, to the Bells for free, and then obviously they get paid to go up the Bells, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I think that makes this a highly attractive place to come for a lot of people. I also know a lot of parents that rely on RAFTA to get their kids around to different activities, because a lot of parents I know work, and you know, the school bus will get them somewhere after school, but from there to home or to the next activity. And I think a lot of parents feel RAFTA is safe and reliable, and you know, they know that their kid is going to be fine on it, and you know, it's easy to pull up the app with the times. And I think that those are really important things that we need to take into consideration. And before I was the alternate for Markey on the RAFTA board, and I have to go to this corridor meeting about the railroad and the Rio Grande, I never knew that RAFTA took care of the Rio Grande Trail. And that is a big deal, because as you saw with the Glenwood Bridge and now the Aspen Bridge construction, people are riding their bikes. They're parking, getting out of their cars, taking their bikes or taking the bus into town. And I think we're only going to continue to see more of that, and we have to be able to meet the needs. So even though you yourself might not be a bus rider or any of those things, or want to ride your bike and you're hell-bent on taking your car every day, that's fine. But there's a lot of people in this community all the way to Newcastle that benefit and rely on this as a means of getting to work or getting their kids to and from places. So I just think everyone really needs to think about that when they vote for this tax.
Thank you, Lisa. Anyone else?
Yeah, Alyssa, I don't disagree with everything you said. I am undecided about this, and at this point, I'm not willing to support a resolution. My primary problem are twofold. One is the number of tax increase proposals that have been presented to this community in the last couple of years. And I think that we're really starting to squeeze the community. On top of which, we have ballot initiatives from other organizations that want to de-Gallagherize, which will also, in effect, be a property tax increase. Everybody's got good, everybody's got good reasons. Everybody's got good ideas, and all these things add to this community. So far, the voting public, the voters, have not yet said to any one group, okay, let's see what you can do without this money before we provide it to you. I feel that that time is coming. Secondly, and maybe this is my biggest problem with the RAFTA proposal, is that the projections that are being proposed are 37 years out from today. And as we in this town certainly know, we had projections in 2004 of what this town was going to look like at this point in time with the development of Base Village. And those projections got blown to bits 4 years later when the recession came. I find it hard to accept that projections 37 years out are nothing more than best guesses, because we don't know the ups and downs of the economy and how that's going to affect us and how it's going to affect the growth that these projections project. So those are kind of my big issue areas. And as I say, I'm not at this point. I'm not willing to support this resolution.
Bill?
I'm prepared to support Resolution 7A. I think that for all the reasons you guys just described and that Reed described earlier, I mean, we have got an employee issue in our valley that needs to be addressed. I don't disagree that our town has been hit with a lot of property taxes recently, from the water and sand to the new fire department, and the school for that matter. But I just think getting cars off the road needs to be, one of our very top priorities. For $500,000 worth of property value, to essentially ask that owner to buy a bus pass, a one-way bus pass to Glenwood, which is essentially what it would amount to, is a pretty small price to pay for the service that we're getting for that, and what's coming down the road. I think we can expect to receive less federal funding in the future, and I think that this will allow us to continue to provide the services that we need going forward.
George?
Can I just address some of Bob's concerns?
Sure.
Yeah, and I appreciate your concerns and your questions, Bob. It's hard to forecast 30 years out. I understand that. However, we have a 5-year budget, and that 5-year budget shows us specifically that for us to maintain our current level of service, we will start to dip into our reserves. And within 10 years, as that line drops down, we will be in a negative capital reserves balance. And so we'll be in a negative fund balance, and you can't operate in a negative fund balance. So that is coming. That's around the corner. The way we will address that over the next 5 years is to curtail service. That's the only way we can do that. So that's coming. But right now, RAFTA last year transported 5.2 million passengers. Projection over the next 20 years will show that RAFTA will need to provide and transport over 7 million passengers based on the growth. And some of that's coming from Snowmass Village. So I just wanted to let you know there is some reality in these numbers, and there is some immediate impacts.
Thanks.
Needless to say, I'm a staunch supporter of RAFTA, being the Snowmass Village rep on the board, second of which is using RAFTA. And if we talk about employee shortage, which we heard from Reed, and the number of people I see getting on and off the bus commuting to Snowmass from down valley, I can tell you, you're not gonna hop in a car. You're gonna rely heavily on RAFTA, and the minute you start cutting service, i.e. the number of buses running up and down, it's a disincentive to have to stand and wait and wait and wait to use a bus. I'll find another job someplace else. So we need to focus on having our employees live here and our employees being able to have a decent commute on a bus. So I'm very supportive.
And also too, in the, looking at the budget stuff that we had in our packet, in the notes from the FAB, they said property owners will see minor mill levy reductions due to the maturity of the swimming pool bonds in 2018 and Drosty in 2019. So, you know, there's going to be some deductions and some additions. And I think that, you know, last year we had the school tax and the fire station, all these things, but these are all essential services to living here. I mean, the bus system and all that RAFTA does is an essential service. And I understand what you're saying, Bob, but I think that it will do more harm than good for this not to pass. So.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution for ballot initiative 7A, and that is resolution 31? Oh, I'm sorry, no, it's 29.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 29, series of 2018 for the RAFTA ballot issue 7A.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Oppose?
Aye.
Okay. 3-1. Okay,
Thank you all.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Okay, let's move on to resolution number 31, amendment 74. Clint, do you want to take this one?
I'll just read it up real quick. Amendment 74 is an amendment to the Colorado Constitution. It requires, if passed, it would require either the state or any local government to award just compensation to any owner of private property when a government law or regulation reduces that property's fair market value. It's a very difficult takings type legislation that's being proposed. Essentially, because of the way it's... I'm not on, was I? My green light wasn't on. I just saw it. The way it's proposed, this types of taking legislation is any kind of legislation the town passes. It could potentially negatively impact someone's property value, or they could perceive that, and they would have the ability to take us to court. The takings legislation the states had in the Constitution has been there since the 1870s or thereabouts. It's actually it allows more leeway for residents than the United States Constitution, and so there's a strong belief that the way that the Constitution works currently is appropriate, and that the legislation that's being proposed is exceptionally one-sided and can be very, very detrimental to municipalities and the state itself. CML is our state lobbyist. They're coming out as a full court press against this for lots of different reasons, those just mostly being what I just talked about. But without any further ado, it's a strong recommendation that the council pass a motion supporting Resolution 31, which opposes Amendment 74.
Okay, what questions do you have for Clint? Anyone? Do I have a motion to approve resolution number 31?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
So, I was at a meeting this afternoon from Count Me In Colorado,
Cool.
which is an organization that attempts to be non-biased and present the information in the various amendments and propositions and the ballot initiatives for the state. And when we got to this, the person who was making the presentation used the same word that Clint just did, that it's like it's an extension of the taking law. But when I read the actual verbiage of the amendment, there's nothing in the amendment verbiage that talks about taking. So I said to this person, the presenter, I said, look, and we don't have the language here, unless you have it in front
I
of you.
didn't include the whole.
Yeah, but this particular one is short. And it basically, I'm kind of going on memory, but it basically says, if there's a legislative or anything in the code, right? Because code is legislative. Essentially, I asked the question, if there was a change to the land use code, to a zoning, where a property owner's property was rezoned, would that be considered a taking under this statute? And she said, yeah, I think that potentially is a taking. So the taking really doesn't express the significance of this proposed amendment and what it would do, because municipalities modify and change their land use codes
And zoning is,
and zoning, on,
Further examples, if you issued a liquor license
yeah.
and the neighbor said, oh, that's gonna decrease my property value, that could cause a lawsuit.
That could cause a lot.
That same neighbor might say, oh, I didn't get my liquor license, now I'm gonna sue because you're decreasing my property value. There's the wide openness of this.
That's right.
Is scary.
So, I guess my point is just to essentially agree with what we're trying to do with a resolution and really express how widespread and broadly this amendment is written, and how much the extent of the damage it could do to municipalities across the entire state.
To be frank, if this were to pass, if you were to pass legislation, you're damned if you do, and if you don't pass legislation, you're damned if you don't, because you could theoretically affect property value one way or the other. So no matter what you did or didn't do, you're setting yourself up for lawsuits, which is the scary part.
okay, we have a motion on the table. We have a second. Any further discussion? All in support, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you, Bob, for that update. We're moving on now to the housing summary. Come on, Betsy.
So I'm going to take 2 seconds and introduce our Betsy Crum, our housing director. This is her, I think, her first official presentation to the
It is.
council. She's 4 or 5.
Today is the anniversary of my 6th month. I've just
did not
completed my
make her a
6th
cake.
month.
That's the kind of guy I am. I should have made it. But I did get her a presentation in front of council to celebrate the
It's a
6th month
present.
anniversary.
That's my
I wish
present.
I-
Did you get flowers today?
I wish I was that thoughtful. I'm not. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Betsy. I asked her just to kind of give a brief update to council, so you guys can get to know her, let her talk about some of the issues we're addressing and what you guys can expect coming up.
Thanks. So I'll just do a kind of an overview of a number of the things that we're working on, and just to say that this is my 6th, I just am starting my 7th month today, and it's been really great. I actually did catch a cold. I had my first hut trip, so where I caught my first cold since I've been out here. So you'll have to excuse my, I'm having a little trouble with my voice. But so I'll just follow the outline I gave to y'all. I think in terms of our existing portfolio, in our rental housing stock, I think I've been impressed since my interview with what a great housing stock we do have here, and how attractive and well-maintained it is. Having said that, the Brush Creeksides Palisades development was renovated fairly recently and is in great shape, and honestly has reduced the demand on our maintenance staff considerably. We get almost no maintenance calls from there, which is a great outcome from that. Our Villas North property and Mountain View properties are in some need of renovation. Villas North had an interior renovation done a couple years ago, so it's got an exterior renovation coming up maybe in the next 2 to 3 years. Mountain View is probably showing the greatest signs of wear and tear over the years, and as a result has the greatest number of maintenance calls and We have some, some water problems isn't the right word, but we need to sort of increase the ventilation and do some things to really get that up to speed. So we're looking at both interior and exterior upgrades to that from our reserves and our funds available over the next 2, 3 to 4 years. Because that's going to be a big project. That's 92 units. So that's a biggie. Our Mountain View 2, which is our newest rental development, is in great shape. We just did roof, so it's about 20, we had about 25-year-old roofs there, but the rest of the building is in great shape, and I don't really see a big renovation needed there in the next bunch of years. On our ownership housing, I think, again, really an impressive stock of housing. I would say since I've been here, we've had a turnover, a sale, or disposition of about one property every month or so. And there's been huge demand for those, not surprisingly, as there is for our rental housing, too. I'll kind of touch on that later without, just because I had an opening, too, in the public comments period. But we've had maybe 25 to 30 applicants for every one of those ownership properties that turns over. So those are great, and the price, the price point is terrific, and we try to really price them so that a range of folks who are working in town and want to make their lives here have an opportunity to live there. Some of the things that we're looking at, I've been looking at since I started here, there was funding in this year to do greater enforcement. We're looking to kind of push that over to next year, mainly because I was new and I wanted to really understand a lot of what some of the enforcement issues are in a resort community and understand how our regulations impact enforcement. We are looking at a number of things when we have some vacancies that we're aware of, or we have direct complaints, we follow those up. I think we'll get more, a couple things that in the next year will open up enforcement opportunities. One is that it's time for our biennial affidavit, which I'm sure anyone who lives in our housing knows. They have to reaffirm that they meet the ownership criteria once every 2 years. And that's an opportunity if we're either aware of a non-enforcement or they disclose or a non-compliance or they disclose a compliance issue, we can follow up on that at that time. It's also time to renew our leases at the end of the year, and that's where we really look to issues of continued workforce eligibility, full-time, year-round Snowmass Village and Pitkin County employment. So in 2019, I think with a budget, we'll look to be a little bit more aggressive on the enforcement. Clinton and I continue to talk about it. I think we need to do it in a way that gives people time to come into compliance if they're not in compliance, and but that still respects the requirements of our housing, which are not that many, but are pretty pretty straightforward and important, and form the foundation of our housing development. We're also looking at our regulations. I have as a goal to have any changes to our regulations, which are longstanding, in place before we break ground on the next phase of development. Some of the things we're looking at currently are the possibility of incentivizing downsizing. Right now, it's tough for people who own, especially some of the larger homes, because they don't meet the income and asset limits if they want to downsize. And so it's a disincentive really for anyone to ever leave these larger single-family homes in our portfolio. We've been having a lot of complications, I guess, a lot of time spent around the idea of home-based businesses. With workforce housing, we look to support the business community. But more and more, we're having people who are starting their own businesses, and because of the internet and the ability to work flexibly, we have more and more people working from their homes. So we want to make sure we honor the workforce business support concept of it, while still understanding that the way people do business is changing and is not so much getting out of their house, taking the bus to their employment place, working there from 9 to 5 and going home again. There are some shifts to that. And then the third is, again, the tightening up in the regulations our ability to do compliance. It's kind of mentioned but not really spelled out very well. So So we'll be, that I think we'll come back to the council on in the next little while. Coffee Place is moving along. We have engaged Cuniff Architects as our architect. We're in the due diligence phase right now around the site itself, soil testing, surveying, and then I think looking to launch, to have a community meeting, to talk a little bit more with the folks who are the biggest stakeholders about it, and then try to move to the zoning process, getting a preliminary sketch review, hopefully in the next couple months. If we're lucky and things go well, I think we're looking to break ground maybe the end of the summer next year with a 12 to 15-month construction cycle. So it would be 2.5 years at this point to get to sale. And then in terms of new opportunities, my background, which you probably know, I've talked to all of you, is as a developer, so I'm always kind of looking around and seeing what looks like it might be a good opportunity, and still keeping with the beauty and the charm of the community we're in. So one of the things that we've been talking about a little bit, I call them tuck-in opportunities. Do we have property that is in our existing development where we might be able to tuck in a few more units, another building or two on the site, especially up in the Mountain View 2 area, and even Mountain View 1 and along Brush Creek might have some opportunity without a huge visual impact to do a few more units. And then as other folks are coming to town and interested in doing new development, I talk to folks all the time who maybe want to add a few more condos in their private market and have some mitigation requirements. It's an opportunity to just add a few units as we go. And then I think, as I've been here longer than 6 months, start to talk about what's next. I use the pipeline word sometimes when I talk to Clint, but it's, there's a lot going on. We have a great staff. I just want to mention what a great legacy Joe Coffey left to this town, and the other staff that work in the office. And so it's been, kind of moving in and stepping into this role has been fun and exciting, and he left something good behind. So it was not difficult. In terms of the demand, I just want to echo a little bit, because I figure you might ask a little bit about that. I probably get 2 to 3 calls a day from people who've been offered jobs and are brand new to looking to come to the community. This is new. This is relatively recent, and I think it's somewhat tied to the base village, to the Limelight starting to hire. I've had people call and say, I have a job offer, but the offer's contingent on housing, and so I need to find housing or I don't get my job. That's a surprise to me. We have folks who have been here a long time. We've seen a shift, I think, over the years. Reed spoke to it, that when Mountain View was built, it was the 2 and 3 bedroom units were thought of as roommate units. They're now family units. We have a baby boom going on up there, and so a lot of people are choosing to make their lives here, and it's great, and it's great for the community, and it also reduces the turnover in our housing. So we do have a lot of demand. Our waiting list for each unit type is currently, and we try to keep it update. We try to purge it about every 3 to 4 months to make sure it's up to date. Probably about somewhere between 80 and 100 people on the waiting list for each unit type. So it's pretty strong and substantial. And I'll just say what I always say when I get in front of somebody is this is a world-class resort, and I think housing, things like transportation and housing are a real strong piece of the infrastructure that's needed to make this community go and continue going, as we continue to flourish and compete. It's really important. So with that, I'll see if you guys have any questions.
How many units are we looking at, or bedrooms at Coffee Place?
So I included in the packet. Thank
Very
you.
nice, very nice
PDF
diagram.
to show what the potential layout is. It'll be 16 units total. 3 of them will be duplexes, so six units altogether will be two-bedroom duplexes, and the balance we're looking to have be three-bedroom, single-family detached of various sizes.
64 bedrooms?
Oh, I didn't count up the bedrooms.
Oh,
30 times
You
10
just
is
did it on your,
30,
she did it off the top of her head.
42, I think.
We had hoped to have a few more units kind of headed down toward the horse ranch, but those are not under our control right now. So maybe when they see how awesome it is, they'll
Good.
just step up and donate that land. Who knows?
Betsy, what's your experience with what you might say is a good number of demand, a good demand number per type, per housing type, that provides some relative balance between supply and demand?
I think it depends again if it's for sale versus rental housing. Excuse me. Usually in rental housing is a little bit less certain. People are a little less motivated, or other things may come up. So usually, I would say maybe we'll go through maybe four people before we'll lease up a unit. Sometimes the first one we call will say yes. Sometimes it'll be a little bit different. Depends on the unit type. There has been a lot of demand for efficiency apartments, but when folks get in there, a lot of times we're getting more and more couples who are asking to look at those. So when they get there, they rather wait for a one-bedroom, that sort of thing. So sometimes we'll go through a few of those. The 2 and 3 bedrooms it's usually the first person we call. We have also a fairly large transfer list, which are people who moved in and have lived there for years, and now they've gotten married, or they've had a child, or they've had a second child, and they're looking to transfer. So the 2 and 3 bedrooms are in very high demand. You're asking maybe more from a market standpoint?
Well, I think from your experience,
Yeah, before.
because 80 to 100 is probably too much, is definitely too much, but what your experience might be.
In my past, I usually hope to get 4 or 5 applicants for every one unit, so that turns over. It's where we have now, we don't really have much turnover, so 80 is too many on a list. But on a for sale, it's more like 3 to 1. We will not have any trouble getting rid of that. So for 16 units, and those will all come online. What you're asking is absorption, which is different than demand.
Right.
So if we were building 92 units of new rental housing right now, I'd say that would be too many for an absorption standpoint. But 16 new units of housing, because we get 30 to 1, shouldn't be any trouble with absorption, because our rental housing is really a feeder for that as well.
Right.
I mean, again, depending on the price point and so forth.
Right.
But
No, that's that was part of the decision to, move forward as quickly as we've been trying to on Coffee Place, because it would free up, in theory, we anticipate it would free up rental units.
Well, and the other, our requirements are relatively strict for people to apply for housing. They have to be full-time, year-round Snowmass employees. And that's one slice of our market. That's the slice I care the most about, and that we're the most devoted to here in the town.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people who won't necessarily come on our list if they're new to town, for instance. We've had most of the people who are getting housing now have been here 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the waiting period, because our list is based on number of years worked in the village. But when someone comes in and they've worked in the village for 10 or 12 years, they kind of jump to the top of the list.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the folks who've worked 3 or fewer years get discouraged and maybe look somewhere else too. So, if we were ever to get through those people who've been at the 4 or 5, 6 year level, if we got through that, I would predict there'd be a little more churn at the lower end of the list, because the young people who move here, you know, it's anecdotal, but we hear stories of people who come here and try to work for a couple years and cobble it together, couple of jobs, living with 6 roommates in a private market unit. They want to make their life here, but the list is long and the opportunities are tough.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, from a demand standpoint, from an absorption standpoint, we have no problem, 0. And as we move forward, and, you know, I think as the jobs in Base Village come online more, our list at that lower end is going to be tighter, is going to be bigger and bigger too.
Yep.
And it's grown over the years. I mean, I did do a little analysis to see where it was over the last 10 years, and it's been a steady increase of waiting list demand.
Mm-hmm.
And also number of people who've been trying to buy a house.
Okay, thank you.
So you're welcome.
Any other questions for Betsy?
Welcome, and
Thank you.
great to have you here. Couple questions. One in regard to Coffee Place and in-complex bids. Have we determined if those people who live in complex will have the first opportunity for those?
We have not determined.
I'm going to let Clint take
Yes,
that
let
one.
me grab this one.
He's
Okay.
whispering.
It's like, we have not made that determination, but because we think the rules are gonna change, we're leaning against it at this point. The
Yeah.
rules being to allow for the downsizing and whatnot, we would need to change it up a little bit. If that's the goal of the council, and I've heard the council say that, we need to get that sure and happen on the bigger houses, that in complex wouldn't work.
Right, good. And I'm really glad to hear you talk about tuck-in opportunities, because I think that's, you know, because we're so built out at nearly 97%, I think that presents a real opportunity for us. And even in the back of our comp plan, we have a listing of number of potential additional units, which I think is pretty interesting information as well. So I was glad to hear you talk about tuck-in. The other part I think that is really important, because we do have 92 units over at Mountain View, and one of my pet peeves is seeing people walk on the road from Mountain View on Brush Creek Road over to the village, and encouraging people to try and walk using the walking paths that we have and the bridges across Brush Creek. I noticed that on the uphill side of what's above the Palisades,
Going toward the mall?
going towards the mall,
That's the creek side.
the creek side,
Brush Creek and Creekside,
those are
yeah.
the ownership units
The
up
owner
there?
units are the last 3 buildings.
So apparently there's been a fence erected because people from Mountain View have been coming down that side and then going across the bridge there. I assume that's why that fence it's kind of a temporary fence.
I've seen it, I don't know why it was put up, but that's.
I
that's-
think
that's
That
own-
wasn't put up by us.
That's ownership,
Yeah.
Okay,
ownership con.
We have, I can go check into that. We do have a path, if you notice, that comes, you know where the bus stop is, right at Mountain View. There's, right across the street from that is a path that had been a dirt path, and we've actually put some tie walls and, you know, done some maintenance of that, and we do shovel it even in the winter. That gets people down to the parking lot, and then they can take the bridge over to the Stonebridge Bridge, you know, the one over Lot 1, through Lot 1 as to get down the lower, or pick up the trail, right, and go all the way up and through the woods. You know, the paths, I'm not sure why people walk on the road. I think it's pretty dangerous myself, and we could look into maybe a little bit of signage or something that would, certainly we give out notices all the time. I can encourage people to take that path, but
yeah.
we get a lot of ridership.
I mean, I think it goes back to kind of a point that Dave Peckler always makes, is we need to put sidewalks in or paths in where people walk. And I think both that upper bridge location and the lower one that you were just talking about are prime examples of places that we need to provide really good walking surfaces for people. Because in the winter, you know, I
It's icing.
talk to people who slip and fall trying to, you know, run to their job or whatever it is. So I think if we just had really good access to both bridges from Mountain View, I think it would be really
And probably
beneficial.
improve lighting too. That's what I have found on those
Right.
trails.
I'm sorry?
Lighting.
Oh,
Lighting.
lighting. Yeah, let me look into that upper one. The lower one, I know we sometimes debate, how much maintenance we put in it, because once we maintain it, then we need to, it becomes sort of something that is a liability potentially. But I think if people are using it and slipping and falling, it's kind of a liability already, and it's in lieu, if we're not going to have, a different way for people to get up there. People do tend to take the path of least resistance, and so if they're, if they want to walk on the street, they walk on the street. But that's why that lower one became one that we maintain, because they were doing it anyway. The upper one, it may be complicated by the fact that it's in the owner units.
That's not.
It's not?
That's not why.
All right,
I mean,
I'll check it out.
there's some other history. If you remember when we did the CCP, that was part of the whole cross-country trail system. And one of the ideas was, let's start plowing. And we haven't gotten that done yet. But that's one of the ideas, is to enhance those kind of ideas. The other one that was discussed was the walking paths around Donny White Curve. Is that something that should be done? Because that's where people go. It's got visual impacts, but those are all ideas that need to be explored with you all. And us, of course.
Yeah, I think those are, we just need to encourage people to walk more often and use the transit system. So anything we can do, I think, would be helpful.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything else for Betsy? Well, welcome. It's
Thank
good to
you.
see you again.
Thank you, Betsy.
Yeah.
No, I'm really
Betsy.
happy to be here,
Yeah.
so thank you.
Good, thank you.
Okay, next item is the budget.
Fun times.
Do we need a break? Anybody need a break? Okay. Y'all good? Okay. Okay, Clint and
It's-
Greg?
It's the most beautiful time
Marion?
of the year.
It's a bit-
It was
is
until
beautiful
today.
outside.
Oh my God, this is when the excitement happens, this is when the glory happens, this is when the reporting gets fired up.
Oh, yeah.
Marianne just relaxes, she says, oh, this is fantastic.
Yeah, not.
So before I
And
jump
she's
in,
got her box.
she's got the.
I do, but it's just on standby. I understand we have a certain amount of time tonight, so. I think it's gonna be the Clint and the Greg show tonight, so.
Unless you ask a hard question, then we both defer to the brains behind the operation.
Absolutely.
So what we're hoping to do tonight is jump through the cover memo, I think, is what we're trying to get through tonight. We may or may not get through that. I wanted to make sure that we gave Greg Smith, who's the chair of the Finance Advisory Board, a chance to go over his letter of the recommendations from the FAB. As far as schedule goes, we have tonight for an introduction. On the 15th, you're going to get a presentation from the Tourism Department. That'll probably be half an hour-ish or whatnot. And then the 17th, I believe, is that right?
I think that's the
18th?
date. Yes.
Thursday, the 18th, from 8:30 to 1, I believe, we scheduled a meeting with the council to get into a lot of the detail. And then if there's other questions after that, we can schedule a further meeting. And then what we're really aiming for is adoption on Monday, November 5th. And so go ahead.
We also have EOTC on the 18th.
The 18th, if I remember right, you got a long day. I had to look up the,
I think we have
That is
EOTC
correct.
that day too.
It's all on the
yeah, it's on the,
draft agenda.
and so the 18th is a long
Let's
day.
go get excited about working all day for a change, Bob. Welcome to.
I can't do that anymore.
If you wanted us to adopt the budget tonight, we would be happy to skip the 18th, 5 hours. Whatever is the council's pleasure, what we'd be happy to do on those types of things. So with that, hopefully we'll take a little bit of, like, maybe an hour tonight, get through a bunch of the stuff, give Greg his chance to make sure his points are made, and then the 18th would be the next big chance after the tourism department. I won't read the letter that I gave you in your packet, just because I don't want to put you to sleep, but I will reiterate that first part of that paragraph, is that I know there's concerns by some members of the council that have said, they're not great at numbers, and this is, there's a concern that this is like a numbers game. I'll reiterate that I think that this is a policy game, and hopefully when you guys are reviewing this, that as a council, you're making sure that we're tackling the policy questions or the policy issues that you all put before us as staff. So if there's a hot button issue, if there's a goal that's not being met, if there's something we need to be addressing more thoroughly, a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, allocating dollars towards that effort is important. And in my mind, that's the importance of this budget. And so when I present to the FAB, Mary and I present to the FAB, I'm sure Greg will get into it, they will come back with some financial concerns about, hey, this might not make sense financially. And a lot of the time, my answer is, well, that's great, but it makes sense because it meets the goals of the council. And so we try to find that balance between making financial sense, but really meeting those political goals that you all set a couple years back, and that make sure we're taking steps to achieve that. So when we're doing the budget, of course, we're working to make sure that the meat and potato issues are taken care of, that public safety is taken care of, those types of things. And then right after that, we make sure that the goals of the council are being addressed. And you'll see a lot of that in this budget proposal is with the goals that you all outlined a couple years back. And so if we hit the mark, great. If we went too aggressive on some things, we're all ears. And if we went too light on other issues, I think that's really the importance of this budget review, rather than crunching the nickels and the dimes or the millions and the billions that are in here. So that said, right now the 2019 budget will be generating $31 million next year projected, $37 million in expenditures. That $7 million, that difference, the $7 million difference, is to be invested in capital funds from dollars we have in reserves, and we've set aside for that. So I know last year there was concern about, is it deficit spending? I'll let Greg kind of speak to that. I'd like to give the FAB's opinion, but again, I think I would make the same observation that we made last year, that we have saved those dollars up for these expenditures. So I don't think we're doing I don't think it should be considered deficit spending. The other change I would just point out is last year there was some concern about how we were doing some of the budgeting and the carry forwards. So there's a new column in the budget this year with projections, and we are trying to identify how we perceive the projects going forward, so that we can better identify what those projects are, and what you can expect to get done this year, and what dollars will be carried forward. And so hopefully this idea of projections will clarify some of the confusion we hit last year with getting some projects done and not other projects, so it's a little bit more clear. With that, I might start just going through some of these projects and some of the highlights, unless, Greg, I don't know if you want to jump in on some thoughts, or if I should start.
No, I would agree with everything you've said so far, and might be good for you to go through some of the major investments, and then I can certainly go through mine quickly.
Okay. We did, a couple years back, the council increased the reserves for all the funds, and so when we put the budget together this year, all those reserve amounts are being maintained at 25%, which is, I think, just an effort that we know that this growth can't continue forever, and so we have increased those reserves, and we're maintaining those reserves at that 25%.
So is that why some reserves, or quite a few of the funds, had lower balances, or projected to have lower balances in December of 2019?
That and capital investment.
That and capital investment. So
The reserve amounts are largely, they're largely staying the same. We've maintained them, but I don't know.
Well,
The fund balance, the total fund balance, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
It's dropping by about 6.5 million. But we're spending about 7 million out of reserves. So if you took the difference between that, the reserve balances are actually growing by 500,000. Or our revenues over our expenditures are above by about 500,000, but we're using about 7 million in reserves. And that's broken out. There's about $4 million in the CIP that we're saying we didn't spend in 17, we're not spending in 18, but we are budgeting to spend that in 2019. We have the mechanical issues, which Clint will hit for the rec center. That's another million, so that's already 5 million out of that 7.
Well, so I'm a little confused, and I guess I need some clarification just so that I can kind of follow things along. When I look at page number help if I start at the beginning.
Yeah, how about page one?
Towards the beginning,
Yeah, well, I lost my,
page 6.
hold on.
Where it shows that the beginning fund balance is 37 million and the ending fund balance is 30 million.
Yeah, that's where I want to try to get to, but somehow I lost it. I'm back.
Page 6,
Page 5 or 6?
Yep.
Page 5,
same,
yeah, page 5 is fine.
okay.
So it shows a beginning fund balance, then pluses and minuses, and an ending fund balance. So those fund balances, they include the 25% reserve,
Correct,
plus whatever additional there is in excess of that 25%.
correct.
Reserve.
In other designations.
So we've been taking these fund balances down. As an example, the general fund, the fund balance decreased by 2,800,000 and plus.
Correct.
Is the plan to lower those fund balances to the 25% that we require?
The 25% remains in those funds. That's the first thing that really gets funded out of the reserves, is to make sure that 25% is hit. And that's 25% of our revenues. For the 2.8 million, for example, in the expenditures, we're using 700,000 out of the community purpose, which is a separate reserve fund within the general fund balance. So we have projected to use that on Building 6. The Holy Cross, you saw the solar and the micro hydro. That's using about $1 million out of the Holy Cross reserve funds.
Right.
That's a separate reserve, so none of those are touching the restricted fund balance, the 25%.
Understood. Okay.
For those that, not number-wise, if you look at page 11, Mary Ann hates this chart, but for those of us that aren't not numbers people, the page 11 chart, I think, kind of shows that. And if you look at the chart, if you look at the chart, that blue bar chart are our required reserves, that 25% operational reserve.
Okay.
It's staying the same all the way across. That red bar is what we call funds available. It's the funds that we can do projects with. And yes, we are showing those dollars available going down over 5 years. But we're maintaining that reserve at 25%.
Right.
So in year 5, we will have less dollars to do capital projects for sure.
All right. So then we add those two together,
For the total,
right?
yes.
And we add those two together and we're at 9 million and change.
Then you'd have to go to page 12, which has the designated reserves. And the designated reserves are the reserves that are for the Holy Cross Fund, for the Base Village Community Purpose. It's
Gotcha.
all those other categories. And all of those are on page 2. All of those different amounts are broken out for you by fund, by category on page 2.
Now I follow. So I have to add all of these three together.
And
that
that's
gets me
just for the general fund.
for the general fund, and that gives me the number on the earlier page. Okay.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah. Think. Go ahead.
That's the fun stuff. So we're being conservative. That's the bottom line. We're trying to be fiscally conservative, still get some work done. One of the questions about that, and I know that has been brought up, and I'll just mention, one of the first things we need to make predictions about are upcoming sales tax rates. And the first bullet, we try to outline what we're projecting next year for a sales tax rate increase. Right now, we're projecting or not right now, but within this budget, we're projecting a 3% increase over the 2018 projection. I know we've done comparisons with other communities, whether that are projecting higher. This 3% over 2018 projection is a 4.4% over what we had budgeted for 2018. So depending on how other communities are measuring, I don't want to speak to that, but we are comfortable that a 3% increase over 2018 projections is appropriate. that is obviously a significant amount of revenue that constricts or opens up funding availability. Lodging tax, we've got a 3% increase, but that's 2.45% over budget. Two large revenue sources. Building revenues, which are actually building revenues, are a revenue source for us. We've got at flat. I will jump down a couple bullets. If you remember, all the revenues we received from the one-time revenues we received from Base Village for Building 7, 8, 4, and 5, we've set those dollars aside. So these went straight to basically the fund balance. We did not want to depend on that revenue because we knew we'd only receive it once for any kind of ongoing operations. So we identified it early, and we ensured that we weren't going to depend on it going forward. That was a little over $1 million, if I remember right.
Yeah, it's 1.3 less the, what we pay for Safe Build, so it's about 1.2 right now.
$1.2 million that we set aside that we did not want to depend on.
It's rolled into funds available.
Right. That's in that fund balance.
Okay.
I just touched on that. I'm going down. As far as, trying to make sure we're investing in the right spots, the capital reserves, we continue to save dollars back every year for capital reserves for significant building maintenance. That's boilers, roofs, that kind of thing. That's $460,000 a year that we set aside for that. Later on, I'm going to talk about a significant $1 million improvement in the HVAC system at the rec center. The source of those funds were these annual contributions that we set aside every year for such projects. We've got $100,000 in the budget for charitable grants. We've maintained that. That's flat this year compared to last year. Annual contribution to capital equipment replacement, that's our vehicles. That is flat as well. We project out the life of the vehicles and ensure that we are setting that aside every year so that buses can be replaced on time, snow plows, trash trucks, everything we've got can be replaced. We do that annually. One big chunk, and I don't want to stump you, Marianne, but what's our annual contribution to SURF?
It's 1.4 million.
So again, that's a large chunk of dollars that we set aside annually to make sure that our fleet can be updated and
Yeah, most of it comes from the RET fund for the buses.
Is that offset by grants? The buses, I know we've received grants before for
Yeah.
buses. Was there a
Grants
consideration?
also go into the SURF fund if they're for
Okay.
the buses. And in 2019, I think we're only projecting a $50,000 grant.
Okay.
But when we budget, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've slept. If a bus costs $500,000, in our SURF account, we budget 80% replacement cost.
Okay.
And so if we get more grant funds, great.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we are anticipating grant funds for sure, but a lot of the times we do better than that 20% that we've been getting. Where am I? Sorry.
Personnel.
Thank you. One of the largest expenses we've got next year, obviously, is personnel increase. We're maintaining a 4% merit pool for merit increases next year, and we are keeping health insurance costs. We're allowing for a 5% increase in health insurance costs. Anyone that buys health insurance, 5% sounds like a lot, but if you've been buying health insurance, you know that it's not a lot. So what we do is we set the dollar amount we've got available to spend, and we change the plan in order to fit that dollar amount. We're bending the cost curve, so it's not a reduction per se, but we're not going up the full cost to keep it in the same plan. And we've done that the last several years, and that's how we're trying to meet that council goal of making sure that that's responsible. I don't know, Greg, if you want to touch on something on that one, I forgot.
Yeah, and I'll come back and go through mine very quickly, but on personnel, last year, the town budgeted a 1% increase in pension.
Right.
And funded that by reducing the merit pool from 4% to 3%. This year, the pension carries over. We are increasing merits 4% and healthcare the full 5%. And I guess to reflect the discussion in the FAB, we applaud the town for holding headcount constant because that adds a lot of cost and it's very difficult to reduce. But I think we all recognize that if we go through another downturn, things could get difficult here. And the higher the cost base that we have for employees through things like merit, pension, healthcare, the more difficult it is. You know, you're left with not many degrees of freedom. You're left with cutting people or
Right.
doing something really, really difficult. Having said all that, we certainly don't presume to know what the town's challenges are in terms of hiring and retaining people, and what it takes to be competitive, to have the quality of people that we have. So clearly there's a balance going on. Keeping headcount constant, but paying the people more.
Greg, just a question for you. Since you're in the financial world, worldwide, and I'm sure you read many, many articles and follow a lot what's happening. What's your crystal ball over the next 2 to 3 years?
The economies remain very strong. Consumer confidence is high. You know, as you saw, I sat in on the earlier discussion, but unemployment's very low. Hiring people, especially people with the right skills, is a challenge. But the economy is just absolutely humming along, especially in the United States. China has softened a bit. Europe has softened a bit, and there are lots of tariff and trade and Brexit thing moving. A lot of moving parts, but it is extremely strong and robust at this point in time. And I think most people would say that's likely to continue for at least the next few years.
Okay.
Do we inevitably face a downturn? I think most people would say yes. It's very hard to see it from here, and it's hard to predict when it'll be, but we can't continue at this pace forever, but we have for quite a while now, and it's strong today.
Okay. Thank you.
Spend it if you got it, is that what you just said? It's like, I didn't expect that.
No.
I most am worried about getting qualified employees. That's,
Absolutely. That's a huge challenge to many industries.
And our number one recruitment and retention tool has been our healthcare. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
I can't say recruitment for sure. Certainly retention. Recruitment could be excellent financial
I'm sure you all know it. The healthcare plan here is
it's
very
a
rich.
beautiful
Yeah, we know
healthcare.
that.
Yeah.
Very good.
It's quite nice.
Next bullet down, the good news, property tax rates for the town will be decreasing next year. We're paying off some debt, so that's great. From 8.8 mils down to 8.4 mils. That's obviously great news for us, for our small part of the property tax bill. So we've got a bit of some tough news in here that I'll touch on. The next one is, we say it's the Snowmass Village Police Department, but it's a town-wide effort. If you remember, the last couple of years, we've switched to 800 megahertz
Yeah.
radio. It was a significant capital improvement last year in the $600,000 range. It's largely to help with public safety, but whether it's public works responding to public safety and whatnot, Aspen, Pickens County, Snowmass Village, Basalt, we're all on the same system. With the new system, we've reallocated how a lot of those expenses occur. And so with this reallocation that the dispatch center has come up with, our annual increase is expected to be around $50,000. I will say that number has not been finalized yet. The county hasn't finalized their budget. There's still some wrangling going on, but we think this increase that we've put in the budget will cover any kind of increase
Okay.
we have next year. That's the bad news. The good news is that if you talk to someone like Scott Thompson, who honchoed the Lake Christine Fire Force, he'll tell you it's the first time in his career the communication wasn't the top issue that they had to deal with. The 800 megahertz radio works, and so it's expensive, and that's too bad. But when you need it, it functions really well, and that's why we made that investment.
So the plan is to put Public Works on the same system?
We are all already on it. So when we did that conversion this year, everybody got new radios. I mean, everybody from housing, Public Works, everybody's on that system. And so what happened with is, it's a per radio charge. And so we went from, I'm totally make up numbers, but say 12 radios that were in the PD to 50 radios that are in the town. So we increased the number of radios, and so it's a per radio charge, and there's lots of different variations in that, but our overall contribution is going to increase.
Is that a one-time cost?
No,
Or is it
it's
it's
gonna
like
be-
an annual license?
It's going to be an annual license, and I know that there are some departments and some communities that use the radio system differently than we do, And so there is talk about changing the way that that cost is allocated, whether it's on airtime, whether it's per call. There's lots of different variables. We've gone ahead and settled on this because we're all in the same budget cycle. We needed to get something done. But with this more sophisticated radio system, we'll have a chance to be more equitable in the way that those costs are distributed going forward. I mean, like a good example is fire departments got hit really hard. They've gone from a very low price to up because of the way that they use their radios. We're easy. A lot of our calls don't go to dispatch for like public works. With the new system, we can go radio to radio, so we'll have a chance to save some dollars that way. And so it'll fluctuate how we allocate those costs as a region. But for now, we put this high-end number in here to make sure we had the dollars to pay our bill. More good news. Parks and Recreation Department continues to meet the cost recovery goals set in the poster plan. Depending on what numbers you want to include into that recovery, which I think the best way to do it is to include programming. Cost recovery is set at will meet 57%. The goal in the poster plan is to exceed 50%. So we continue to meet that goal. And then that last bullet I'll touch on is we increased the contribution from the marketing and group sales funds to the CIP by $100,000 each for a total of $200,000. So it's $400,000 total to the CIP. And we call that product enhancement. This last year we did some small projects. We improved the sand at the rodeo. We've done some other small projects. But what we're trying to do is build up a set amount of dollars that we can do something significant with. It hasn't been identified for sure, but things such as transportation up and down between the mall and Base Village is one of the projects we've got an eye on, and we want to make sure we're saving up money for a capital project like that. Daily parking rates set to remain at $10 a day. Solid waste fees, we've got budgeted for a 5% increase. A lot of this is based on the Pitkin County dump fees going up, but it's also salaries going up, healthcare costs, just basically solid waste getting more expensive. Revenues for the recreation center are budgeted to increase from $620 to $690. In all honesty, that's a projection we probably already hit this year, so we think it's safe going forward, next year. But it's just an identification that the rec center continues to be popular, and it's doing well on the revenue side. Franchise fees are some small dollars. You'll remember earlier this year that the council approved a new franchise. We've got a new revenue source that we'll be putting towards making sure our equipment to televise these meetings is up to speed. And then we did a small increase for housing for rentals next year. You can see those amounts on that memo, but basically 5, 15, and 10, 15, 20, and $30 increases per year next year. Any questions so far? Greg, you want to jump in yet? I can quit talking for a second. I'll keep going.
I'd keep going.
I'll keep rolling. So the council's identified a number of goals. This is the part where I started this spiel, was affordable housing, community engagement, community building, safety, resiliency, and regionalism. So we went ahead and did some, I'll just say, aggressive projects we proposed in here to help meet some of those goals. This first one is not so aggressive, but we're proposing to buy clean power from Holy Cross through the, what do we call it, the Renewable Energy Purchase Program. That will increase our energy costs by about $33,000, but that will allow all the energy that the town purchases for our facilities to be from renewable sources. So that's a $33,000 expense we've worked into the budget. We've worked in some extra training dollars for the council. Betsy's already mentioned it earlier. We are recommending that $50,000 that was in this budget be rolled forward next year to help with some of the increased enforcement and regulation development. As she mentioned, she's 6 months in. She wanted to get her feet on the ground before we made any major changes. We're working on it now, but we're asking that those dollars get rolled forward. This is the only major personnel change we've made in this proposed budget, but with RAFTA, with the town picking up the RAFTA service in the spring and the fall, the 15-minute service, we've identified it's really stretching our full-time staff thin in order to get the trips made. And so we're recommending in this budget that 2 full-time seasonal positions be promoted or recategorized to full-time year-round. The hours would remain largely the same, but the major increase is you go to a different health insurance cost. And to Greg's point earlier, we are trying to keep headcount from changing a whole lot, but this is one that we wanted to point out that is going to, we're recommending as a change. The good news with this change is that we do receive revenue from RAFTA because it is their service to operate. So they pay the town to operate that service in the spring and the fall. We think that the revenue we receive from RAFTA for that spring and fall service will cover this increase. We're confident saying that.
What's really going to be important about ballot initiative 7A, because EOTC was going to pull their funding.
Well, the EOTC is committed to us for a couple of years.
Okay, but it's
And I know we would
Through
continue. I'm not arguing against 7A, but
Right.
EOTC funding is that local. We got that in this year. And to your point earlier, I mean, it was probably one of the better policies fights we've had as a community. I mean, it has made a big difference. We've seen tremendous increases, and I think we're going to continue to see that
I agree.
throughout the year. And so in order to provide that, we got to have the
Yeah, we got to have the
drivers to do it.
employees. Yep.
You know, when it used to be seasonal, they'd be on for the winter, they'd be off, and now that we're more of a year-round with more 15-minute service, we needed the 2 extra bodies to
great.
make that happen.
So with the EOTC funding, if 7A passes, then the EOTC funding will fund our 15-minute service. Is that right?
It is right now. The town's not paying for that. That is funded.
I
By
thought that it was a
EOTC.
shared cost with EOTC.
No, and I don't remember the details exactly, but for the town, what we gave up was the EOTC was trying to get the fund balance built up to $6 million for us, and fund this. And so what we committed to is allowing our fund balance towards that $6 million
Go down.
lockbox, whatever we want to call it, for the RAFTA stop on the top. We're allowing that to grow much slower rate because we're taking those revenues that would otherwise go to that savings account for that project to offset this operating cost.
50% of it, right?
Yeah, it's 50.
I don't remember the percentage, honestly.
George and I went through it yesterday.
Yeah.
But it is a RAFTA service, and so RAFTA provides it. It's a deal EOTC has made with RAFTA to provide that service, and so.
So if 7A passes, then we're not going to incur
If 7A passes, then the EOTC will have an extra, I don't remember my number, but let me say $300,000.
I was thinking it's 275,
Yeah,
285,
something like
yeah.
So this line item wouldn't apply.
It would,
You'd
for
still
the
need the
town, it
driver.
would remain the same, because RAFTA still pays us to provide the service for them.
Gotcha.
Who would benefit is the EOTC would have that extra $375
Go back in our
to do
lockbox.
projects with.
Gotcha.
In this last bullet, in this little section here, is the $767,000 going towards Building 6. 700,000 of that was given to the town by the developer as part of the mitigation, and $67,000 is derived from the building permit fee they paid for that building. The council will, assuming the council approves this as part of the budget, a lease will be coming back to you shortly, and that's where you'll actually have some legislative authority to look at that project specifically. I haven't talked this much in
Well, you didn't have to write it so long.
You're doing well. You're doing well.
That's
Clint,
Yeah,
Yes,
let's
sir.
do it.
I don't remember exactly where it was, but there was somewhere in this, the item on update of the land use code to comply with the comp plan.
Right. 35,000.
70, it was 30 she thought she might spend this year before the end of the year, and then 40 next year.
Well-
She had originally budgeted the whole 70 for 2018, but she figured if she can get it started by the end of the,
I'm looking at the calendar.
by the end of the year.
It might not get spent. this
Yeah,
year.
Well, I guess my question is, what are the additional expenses or time relative to updating the land use code?
It's literally writing the code. So assuming you adopt the comp plan,
Yeah.
then there's going to be, I'll just make up a number, but say 15 policies that you guys want to implement from that comp plan.
Was that gonna be done in-house, or is it gonna be done out-of-house?
It'd be done out of house.
Okay.
It's proposed to be done out of house.
So, sorry to step back a little bit, but we also had, I think, a compliance officer budgeted for housing? Is that,
We didn't do an officer. What we did, we set aside that $50,000, and we said we're going to use that to increase compliance and make sure the regulations are up to speed. And so I don't think we'd ever hire a full-time person. Shouldn't say that.
okay,
That 50,000 was not earmarked for that. In reality, we thought there would be some, when we've had to enforce in the past, we've had to get outside counsel involved, outside attorneys involved. We thought that might be part of that expense. And we have used outside counsel recently in this last year. We used our operating funds for that. But if we change the regulations and we want to make sure we're getting ahead of the curve, that's what that $50,000 would be used for.
okay, gotcha.
Clint, and I don't really want to get into this, because it doesn't exactly fit now, but I guess I'd like to talk to you at some point about why we would use, how to use outside support for the land use code without, I guess, getting ourselves bogged down in the same kind of problems that we got bogged down in with the comp plan.
Okay.
So, just, and it's not for now.
And if I can answer just in one brief, this is the hard part, the comp plan is. Once you say, here's the goal, then all we gotta do is write the code to make sure it meets the goal. And so, the arguments now, or the discussions now are, what should the goal be? And that's the difficult part. Once the goal is agreed to, then the actual black and white part of writing that code gets to be much less subjective and easier to achieve that way.
Okay. Yeah, we can talk some more about that, but, yep.
So here's the good stuff. There are good stuff, complicated stuff, the stuff that hopefully is helping the council feel comfortable with the goals that we're trying to reach. We're going to continue with the boiler project. That's $1 million project, $1 million+ project to improve the energy use of Snowmelt Road. The boilers are actually purchased, and they're actually on site, I believe. And we did not want to take the risk of starting that project this late in the year if it didn't get done. So that will start right after ski season ends next year. So the boilers will be installed early next year.
What's the anticipated maintenance savings with these new boilers?
I don't know that. It's significant, and I wish I knew that number. But I mean, if you let me get away with significant tonight, I'll give you that percentage.
Sure.
But it is, no one's listening over there. It's in the 30% range, but I don't know that for a fact.
Good, that's great.
It's significant. And it's
currently the,
energy, it's also the reliability. The
Yeah,
ones we have now are
energy,
aging,
reliability,
so
right,
it's the
right.
Needs to
combination
be
of the
done.
two.
it's the highest cost that we have right now, right?
For energy, for sure. And, and to the staff's credit, just with the existing boilers, they've reduced that by about 30%.
Right,
And so
with all
over
the
the last years,
monitoring and
by not
everything.
keeping it on all the time,
Yeah.
in years past, we'd flip the switch, keep them on, and it'd be on. And now we try to monitor that more and
Right.
be more just-in-time kind of stuff, which is great. And for energy use, it's tough if you miss it by an hour because you can have an hour slick. And so we try to err on, we're trying to work out those details still. The next project we've got identified is the installation of solar panels on Town Hall, Public Works, Mountain View 2, Apartments, Town Park Station, and the Recreation Center. This is a roughly $900,000 project for solar panels. And again, the larger goal we're trying to achieve is help the council meet that 20% reduction for the carbon footprint in 20 years.
I was quite astounded about the length of the payback period.
This is one
Yeah, please.
I'd weigh in on, and you probably saw it in the notes that the FAB sent.
Right.
If I get to the bottom line quickly, the FAB's always happy to undertake any investigation
I was
that
going to
council
say, I would like to take that project right back to FAB.
would like us to, but
Right.
we identified 3 when we
Yep.
went through the budget, and this was one.
Yep.
To your point, Marky, 32 years in the business world is
Long.
an unbelievably long payback. And we were even a little bit, very superficially, we didn't go into the numbers, we didn't go into the analysis, but just superficially skeptical on the 32 years. Solar panels deteriorate 0.5% to 1% every year. Most aren't warranted beyond 20 years because at that point they're only running at 80% of capacity. And one of our more astute members queried whether this was even done on a discounted cash flow basis. We suspect not, or guess not, if he did a quick analysis using a 3% discount rate and the payback ballooned to 60 years. So again, we're not here to question the goals of the town. If the town decides to implement whatever policies or actions are necessary to meet its environmental goals, away we go. But this is one that really jumps out as it does not look like a reasonable payback, and it does not look like a reasonable investment for the town. By contrast, the next one we're talking about, I don't think there was a single member in the micro hydro project. There was a single member that pushed back at all on that. And even one of our we have two members that are on the Water and Sand Board, said there's probably another one of these that we could do as well as a town. So it's not opposition, it's just 32 years is probably understated, and it is still very, very, very long.
The agreed with everything. The one thing that we did not factor into this is grant funds. And so we think a project like this is ripe for grant funding from the state through energy impact grants and through local grant funds through CORE. In fact, we're pretty sure we'll be getting a CORE grant soon. I think you got an email about that today. And so if we could buy down the cost of this through grants at some reasonable amount, then hopefully that would greatly improve that payback.
Well, I do know that when RAFTA purchased panels and what have you, we've been somewhat, a little disappointed in the return.
Yeah.
So I really think this needs a thorough analysis.
Well, yeah, we'd be happy to take that on. And the other, and
But no grant funding.
what I'm about to say is hard to analyze, but the other factor to be considered on this is the technology is improving every year. And even if we were to go forward as a town with something like this, we would say phase it in a bit and take advantage of the learning curve that we'll go through and that the technology is.
And these are fixed panels, aren't they?
Yeah, and a few years down the road, the ones that we're putting in them in at that point in time may be more efficient and may last longer than what we would see today. So it is something that could be phased in over time.
I think the goal would be to do what we possibly can to meet our environmental stewardship goals. So versus us all becoming students of this ongoing technology, I think FAB would be a wonderful project, and perhaps a few members from EAB.
Okay.
And I think that's, when I talked to the FAB about this, I wouldn't say adamant, but I'd say clear that this is not pan out financially, for sure. And it's that balance of the council goals versus the finance versus the EAB, and trying to find that, and that's where you guys get that ultimate weigh in. And I think the recommendations of phasing.
We'd be happy to work with EAB.
Yeah.
We even do have a couple of engineers in our group.
I think it's great. Eric?
So anyhow, that's a big project that we put in here. The next one, as Greg alluded to, is the micro hydro.
Right.
That payback is much sooner. I think it's 11 years, if I remember right. That project is shovel ready. We're actually working with the state now. They've got some free local government assistance, and that's something we've got budgeted as well. I will say for both those projects, we're anticipating using Holy Cross funds, and we chose those dollars. They just seemed to line up. It seemed to be the right purpose. Didn't affect general fund operations. And to the council's credit, we've been saving those dollars for a number of years. We have not been doing dinky little things. We've been trying to save them up for such a big project.
Okay.
The next project, continue with Coffee Place. As Betsy alluded, if all goes well, we'll hopefully be breaking ground next year. I will say that this budget-wise, it continues to be somewhat complicated in that we've got the 2 point.
Well, we have 350 in the budget for design, and we're rolling over 2.9 million for construction next year.
But those rollover costs are what are hard for us to project right now, because we don't know exactly what they are. We are comfortable with what'll end up happening. We think that will end up being our subsidy amount to the project, and then when we'll have to come up with a construction loan to begin with. We'll develop that loan money. We'll build the project, and that roughly $3 million essentially become our subsidy towards the project. And then as the houses sell, pay back the loan that way.
Makes sense.
So it's tough to see exactly in the budget, but that's how we're moving this project forward at this point. Recreation center, I think I was generous when I said the HVAC system at the recreation center has been floundering the last several years. And that's about as polite as we could have made it. You know, we've had 2 flooded gym floors. It doesn't work well. It's old. It was a great novel idea to have a saltwater swimming pool, heat and cool the rest of the building. It doesn't work well. And so we had an internal debate back and forth about whether to try and Band-Aid it or fix it incrementally. And talking to our facilities professionals, they said, this is one you got to bite the bullet on and do right. And so we've taken from reserves, and we're requesting $1 million to get the HVAC system in the facility up and going next year. To do that, we're going to have temporary heat in the gym and the upstairs workout rooms this winter. We're prepared to get that up and going, and then we'll essentially be separating the 2 heating systems, and it's out of my league to explain the details, but it's a tremendous improvement that's projected to last much longer than the system we've got in place right now.
Isn't that going to be cold?
I promise not.
We just have to sweat more.
Well, I just think of the gym. The gym is like so like.
I am confident saying
cavernous.
we are being very thoughtful about how this temporary heat's going to work to make sure we do know it would be an all winter. It wouldn't be like a 2-week thing like it's had in the past. It needs to be a system that needs to work all winter long. And so we're very confident in that. There seems to be a high level of comfort that we can get that up and going. The timing part that is the most, I think, equally critical that we haven't worked out yet is getting the AC on by June. And will that part of the project be done? And so those are a lot of those timing issues we continue to work through.
So you are going to shut off the system so you don't run into the same problem again, essentially? You're not going to utilize the system that's in place?
Essentially. And so I couldn't speak to you to the timing of it. The facility will be open all year. The people will see, just like if you've been there all summer, the AC wasn't working this summer. It was hot. And so it will not be any worse for sure than it was this last year, but we're trying to get that long-term solution in place and figure out the best time.
Well, you gotta fix it, so there you go.
And then continuation of the maintenance of hard surface trails within the town. We have $150,000 budgeted. We started making that investment 3 years back, maybe. And so we'll continue to make those investments in the hard surface trails. And then a number of CIP projects that we've got lined up, $60,000 for our project total. That's this year rolling forward to next year. Some electronic variable message boards. We've got $80,000. Brian Olson, Chief Brian Olson, will be here on the 18th to show some pictures of some ideas that we've got. You know, essentially we've got those little portable boards that have been on both entrances for a number of years now. We'd like to make them permanent, but recognizing all the debates we've had through the comp plan about too much lights, that kind of stuff, we wanted to make sure the council saw that project specifically. And then the land use code is the last project there that I'll touch on. So overall, I think it's a kind of a bread and butter budget. There's not a whole lot of excitement in it. I think the solar, some of these energy issues are probably some of the most exciting things we've got going on. We tried to hold the line. We tried to be somewhat conservative in revenue projections. And in the meantime, we'll spend $37 million.
Okay, Greg?
Okay, well, we've already covered a lot of the material that I was going to go through, but I'd just start by saying Mary Ann and her team do a terrific job. The budget is very detailed, very thorough amount of thought went into it, and we do endorse it. Mary Ann has it down to the departmental level, and it'll be controlled well, and the town continues to exhibit a conservative way of planning the budget as well as then implementing it during the existing year. As we've talked about, there is $7 million more spent in this budget than comes in this budget, but that is due to the project reserves that have been established for that spending. If we roll that forward, though, the same pattern does occur in the future years, and as we've talked about Clint for at least the last several years, Clint and Mary Ann, the town does always when we get to this point of actually signing off on a budget for the next year, get things in balance other than known capital investments and those kinds of things. If we hit a downturn, it will be tough. We will not be able to probably continue this level of spending. But having said that, it is a solid budget and is based on a conservative set of assumptions. Two of the funds, the real estate transfer tax fund and the road fund, are overspent each year and are overspent in this budget. And it is something we need to keep our eyes on. The real estate transfer tax is hard to predict. The road fund, though, we all know that the town has a priority on maintaining the roads. They do a terrific job at it, and that is something we just need to make sure we continue to manage and have adequate funding available. There will be a minor mill levy reduction within the town this next year, 0.3 of a mill, and then the subsequent year for the Drosty bonds, which is another 3 or 4 tenths.
1.1.
That was 1.1.
mills.
Okay. So there is some level of tax burden coming down on the town over the next couple of years. General fund, I already commented on. It does roll down in the future planning, but again, that's sort of a result of the way these plans are developed, and we have exhibited every year when we actually have to confront that of solving that problem. We talked about the personnel cost increases, the merit pool, and the medical costs. Another item in this is the solid waste fees. We had suggested to Clinton, this wasn't something we spent a lot of time talking about, that perhaps given part of the cost increase is also due to the personnel costs, we would suggest from time to time the town look at whether that it does make sense to consider outsourcing that service, as there are a number of companies that service other towns in the valley. Solar renewable we talked about, micro hydro project we talked about, and I just end with the last bullet on my sheet. We will take a look at the solar renewables project. We also suggested that we once again touch base with the marketing group, sales folks on, there's a lot of spending that goes into that activity, and we all benefit from the great results they achieve. But we haven't talked with them recently about metrics and benchmarks, and we would be happy to do that. And again,
How long ago was it that
I think it's been a couple of years.
Less than two.
Yeah.
And I think it's evolved some since then, or at least I defer to Clint.
I would say it's about 2 years since Howard came to the FAB. Howard Gross was the then chairman. And it has evolved, and actually it's evolving almost the other direction. So there's that qualitative, quantitative analysis that the FAB, or not the FAB, the marketing board's going through now, and how best to measure. It'll be a fascinating discussion.
It'll be a good discussion, I think, but it's one we put on our list.
I think it should be done.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And then the final one was the housing project and funds, just looking at the major capital improvement plans that are underway in that arena.
And
But if there,
Covey Place as it evolves.
but if there is anything else that the council would like us to take a look at, we would be more than happy to do that. And certainly you can send us that request at
Okay.
any time during the year.
We probably might have a few more items as we
Get through the
work
budget.
through the detail of the budget. But I think that's a good recommendation on those 3 items.
Okay.
Greg, thank you and the FAB for going through this evaluation and analysis. My question, though, is about what steps are being taken so that to balance out that general fund in the future?
Well, I guess I would just provide you with an overview. Each year, and actually this year is probably typical, we tend to overestimate our expenses and underestimate our revenues. And there is some hope or anticipation that trend will continue and that we are able to bring it into balance. If not, we would have to cut back the capital spending plan. That would probably be the first place to look. And then if we really hit a difficult sustained period of difficulty, we would probably have to go into the other cost elements that the town can control.
So that tracks to become a problem in 2023, by memory?
Lacking a downturn and lacking,
Right.
again, a continued overachievement in budget performance, yes.
Yeah. I mean, at some point before that, do we think it's appropriate to start trimming the capital improvement dollars?
I would say the other part of, it's a partial answer to your question, is also each of the major budget items are maintaining the 25% reserve.
Yes.
So we can weather some bumps in the road without taking drastic cuts. But we had exactly the same discussion, Bob, and it's a great question. Many of us come from businesses where even in the forward years you balance everything. That's not the way the town develops its budget. Other alternatives would be to, and unfortunately, it can consume a lot of Mary Ann and her staff's time, but another way to look at that would be to do a what if. What if in the next 2 or 3 years we did not have revenues higher than expected? Where would we trim and how would we trim? Again, the capital projects is an easy place to look. Not starting new ones, finishing the ones you have only. But that certainly could be something that the town, I don't want to speak for Clinton, Mary Ann, could be asked to look at. I would say, though, on the other side of it, speaking for myself, I don't see a significant cause for alarm at this point in time. The economy's robust. We've got the base village going gangbusters, and a lot of positives should flow to the town's financial position out of that.
That's true.
I don't see danger clouds, but I would still say that that the forward years show more spending than income, for sure.
I mean, we've been talking about this for the last couple of years, and it still feels far enough off where we don't have to, we have to maintain awareness, but maybe not have to do anything, I guess, radical. I use the word radical.
Yeah,
but
I would personally agree with those words exactly. And I'd also say when it was the last time I was chairman, so I can't remember how long ago it was, but we really felt strongly that marketing and sales should get their reserve up to 25%, with the view that if the town does hit a downturn, that's the last place and last time you'd probably want to cut, and they have done that. So we've got a pretty robust base here. Now, is it impervious to a downturn? No, absolutely not.
Good. Thanks, as always.
I don't have any questions at all. How about everybody else?
Just maybe one recommendation. I think one of the big costs that we're looking at going forward is potentially a roundabout at Brush Creek and Owl Creek Road. I think it would be really helpful if you looked at that project, or FAB looked at that project and could give us a recommendation on how that, how the economics of that look to you.
Okay.
And I didn't know, because we haven't really finished the marijuana regulation stuff, but if that's going to cause any increase for enforcement, and if that's anything that has to be budgeted for going forward.
We didn't budget the revenue, and we didn't budget an expense. So when we don't anticipate an increased expense that can't be absorbed operationally.
Okay. And then, I don't know if everyone saw that email from Matt Dubé today, but about the emergency response plan. Did you guys see that?
I didn't see it.
He sent it a few weeks ago, didn't he?
It came in late this afternoon.
No, it came in this
Oh, no, I
afternoon.
didn't
It
see
said,
then.
when he approached us about the town's emergency response
Oh, there
plan,
it
it
is.
became apparent the town needed a stronger plan. It's my hope that you'll raise the issue and decide to budget funds for professional services towards this effort. So I just am bringing that up.
Yeah, I mean, I would disagree with Matt a little bit. I mean, I think our plan is good. I mean, I'm open to it if you guys thought so, but I mean, I think if speaking for our public safety, I think we do have a strong plan. I think it's very interdisciplinary. I think it works very well with the county. I think we're very well coordinated. So I don't know exactly what that plan would be, but I mean, I'm happy to explore it with you.
Well, and Brian came in and gave us kind of some more details on exactly what it is, so I think we're pretty well covered.
I mean, I think maybe just the main thing is doing some public outreach within our community where you have like a session where people could come to learn about what the emergency response plan is. That's one of the things we were talking about at Northwest COG when we were reviewing all these different sort of fire, that had been around Colorado this summer, and one of the kind of lessons learned from that. So, maybe putting a little bit of, I mean, it doesn't have to be a budget item, but putting a little effort into that
Good idea.
would be really great.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, next, what's the next time we revisit the budget again?
2 weeks, 15th.
2 weeks, 15th.
Will be the tourism.
It'll be tourism. We'll go over there. It'll be marketing and group sales fund. That's the only item we've got on the 15th. And then 3 days after that, about
We have
Thursday,
the
the
full-
18th,
the big-
we'll kind of go through the traditional, flipping of the pages and
Thank you.
answering specific questions again.
I think the staff have really worked hard on the budget. The FAB probably is brain dead from reading all of this and putting numbers. So
Thank you very
Clint.
much.
Thank you both.
Yeah, thanks, Greg, Mary Ann.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Sorry, Julianne, but we're going to take a break. Continue our town council meeting. We're working on the comprehensive plan. Per our discussion at our last meeting, we would start today on page 126, which is transportation. And our goal tonight is to hopefully, if possible, get the rest of the way through. And I will then propose that we see if there's any other little minor changes from what Julianne sent out to us. Okay, and then perhaps we ask Julianne to do a final clean, and then we'll look at this at our meeting on the 4th, or whenever the next meeting is.
Yeah, actually, I recommended that we not do it, the next one on October 15th, because you got a long meeting on the 15th
Okay.
already, so I was recommending the
November 5th.
Okay. So,
Madam Mayor, I have one
well,
comment.
wait a minute.
Okay.
I will continue the public hearing on the comprehensive plan.
I have one comment on page 125 for an addition,
Okay?
okay? And the comment is, because this section is all about climate adaptation. So the addition would be something to the effect that due to the potential for climate change impacts to affect the economy of Snowmass Village, it may become necessary to modify certain assumptions used to develop this comprehensive plan. And that would just be at the end of that, on page 125, second column, another sentence at the end.
Well, recognizing
It's
the,
almost a disclaimer.
I was gonna say, since this is not going to be used to advise
The other side,
the other side,
yeah.
so is it over in the body of the documents?
I honestly, I couldn't find a place that seemed appropriate to put in there, unless I look back at strategic initiatives. Maybe the resiliency and sustainability action section, just as either an introductory or at the end. That would be page 26 and 27, if you wanted to see it.
You know, it would almost appear that climate change, this whole plan, if you will, to me, is for naught if we've got climate change.
Yeah,
And all the, every assumption begins to
pretty
change.
much, a lot of them, yeah.
Mhm.
I have a note to include page 124 on page 27.
Climate adaptation in Snowmass Village.
Yeah, so maybe it just, we just insert Bob's language.
Okay, that could go there. You said on page 27? Oh, I see, okay. Green building, mobility, watershed, water management, air quality. Can implement and revisit the regularly, update the resiliency and sustainability plan. So what you're talking about is after that area called next steps?
Yeah, to insert that language that Bob just gave us.
Can't you separate it out? I'm sorry.
We're on page 27 right now.
27, not 127.
Well, what
27.
Bob's suggested statement that was going to go on page 125, the appendix is not to be considered in the future
Right.
planning.
Right.
So you wanted
Go back to page 27.
Okay.
Could you provide that language
Sure.
to Julianne?
Yes, I
This would be
can.
number 11 that you're reading us?
No, this is the next step.
It would be kind of underneath next step.
Because it's not a next
It's
step.
not really a next step, it's almost like,
A disclaimer.
it's like a disclaimer.
Okay.
And the wording was, due to the potential for climate change impacts to affect
Hold on.
Okay, to effect?
to affect the economy of Snowmass Village. It may become necessary to modify certain assumptions used to develop this comprehensive plan.
Would it be okay if we started that not as a next step bullet, but just say note
Sure,
and do it
Yeah.
that way?
absolutely. Absolutely. And, I mean, while we're on this page, can we take care of the other?
Yep.
So, on page 26,
That's where we're all supposed to be now.
26 or
126.
Twen-
126? Oh, you're on page
26.
26.
yeah, because we were there, and I,
Okay. Okay. Got one in pencil.
so,
Yeah.
there would
I
be
think
another.
Clint might have it on his.
Pardon?
I think Clint might have it on
Clint
his.
have it on-
Integration of water resource management with local land use
Yeah.
planning to further improve water efficiency.
Right,
Yeah.
It's there.
right,
We didn't
and
do
then
that.
and then it just has to be added back into the chart, at the end of that section. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna go over to 126.
126.
Comments?
Yep.
I took out Snowmass, community connectivity, the CCP, just changed that language to the language we've talked about before.
Right. So that's been deleted, right? That first sentence been deleted?
In 2016, that sentence, you want to delete that?
Yeah.
So start with based on input received from the public.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Other changes on 126, 127. How about 128? Okay. 129. Okay. 130, let's see. Something at the top. Oh, that's the CCP again,
Yeah, the the first
yeah.
part. Of under first and last mile,
Right.
Julianne?
Yeah, so do you want to start it with, in feedback gathered from the comprehensive plan? Would that be okay? Would strike the first part of that? That works.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. It's in the last. Yep, I see it. Too. Okay, right here, the last part. Okay, for instance, a gravel trail connects Brush Creek to the bus stop east of Brush Creek. Okay, got it.
You know what, there's another one under the Skittles, too.
Yep. So you just want to drop that one under first and last mile connections?
Yeah, there's two in first and last connections, and then there's one
under
on the
Skittles?
Skittles in the second column.
Yep, just start with further study.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it.
Um,
Now we're,
On 130, 131, On the second column, the only full paragraph there, on the next page, on the bicycling, there's a similar sentence that includes a reference to paved paths. It talks about paved trail along Brush Creek and parallel to Owl Creek. I don't know, maybe I'm not, because this just says sidewalks exist, but maybe do we say sidewalks and paved paths exist?
There is paved paths. It's not sidewalks, it's called paved paths.
So we just change the word,
To pave.
change the word to paved path?
But that's in reference to carriage way.
Carriageway has sidewalks. Oh, you're right. It
Yeah.
has sidewalks.
The way it's written anyways.
Yeah,
Right,
okay,
right.
yeah, you're
That's
right.
what
I'm sorry.
I was kind of getting there too, so sorry about that.
That very last, among the 55 Planapalooza attendees. Okay, well, 55, is it 55 people total attended or 55?
That filled out the transportation survey.
$55 is not a significant number
No, it's
of the population. So I didn't give that a lot of credence.
So should we just remove that whole last
Either
sentence?
that or you've gotten comments and perhaps individuals within Snowmass Village have commented or something. Over 51 stated they would not feel crossing Brush Creek Road. 51% of what, 55?
Yeah,
That's 25 people.
26 people,
26
or
people.
28 people.
That's not even statistically significant.
Well, that's why they call it out, I think. I mean, they're trying to be 55% of 55 people or whatever. I mean, that's why they wrote it that way. Not to say 55% of everybody, but, or so.
Well, you
It's
could,
just-
how many people, so if I get this right, 55 people
Filled out a survey.
filled out a survey, and 51% stated they would not feel comfortable crossing Brush Creek Road.
Correct.
Where?
I don't believe the survey was specific. I believe it just said up Brush Creek Road, as I recall.
That's a lot of road. Depends on where.
You know, I mean, that's such a vague,
It's really,
vague statement.
I think we take that out,
Stay with that.
because your sentence prior, while sidewalks exist on carriageway, unsafe walking conditions along Brush Creek Road, and to a lesser extent in neighborhoods, was cited as a common concern, or lesser extent, throughout Snowmass Village neighborhoods, period. And I take that out.
If you stop at neighborhoods, it doesn't, was cited as a common concern and feedback received for this project, period?
That's fine. You could do that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that works.
So just strike starting with among 55?
No.
yeah, strike out, yes,
Yeah.
strike out
Oh,
from
I see.
among
Yeah.
55.
Yeah, I was,
Okay.
yeah.
And that's consensus, everybody, so I can mark it and note it.
Because the very next page, there is a figure. It's figure number 10.
Yeah, that should come out too.
I didn't find it helpful because it's not specific other than Brush Creek Road. like where to where?
You see the question. I mean, it was just, I think the point they're trying to make was, do you feel safe getting across it? And that's when we were talking about different crossing mechanisms and all that kind of thing, and they're trying to show that of the 55 people that took that survey, is it 55?
Mhm.
Of the 55 that took that survey, here's the results. Right?
To me, it's not, it doesn't advise me, other than people, where on Brush Creek Road? Are you up by the divide? Where are you? Is it at Town Park Station? I don't know.
It's up to you guys at this point, really. So if you want it in, it's in. If you want it out, it's out.
Well, since we're not using this to advise, just take it out.
I would.
Everybody's good with that? Listen, Bill, you guys are being quiet. You're good?
Say it again, what are you taking out?
Well, they want to take out this
The thing about the,
graph and this paragraph,
Yeah.
essentially,
Because it's
Well,
not,
just the last sentence, Bill.
just the last sentence.
from
the one
among,
about the 55 people.
Yeah.
from among 55, yeah.
It's fine.
Because we have it already noted in that paragraph that the issues of concern on safety on Brush Creek.
And that graph is connected with those numbers.
Yeah. So on page 134.
Uh, 134, you know, there are a number of statements. So the first paragraph, first column, the last sentence, the town is currently studying the feasibility of a roundabout at the Owl Creek, Brush Creek intersection. There's a number of statements like this that are in here, which will become obsolete. And to me, they will make it more difficult to review and update this document, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years from now, to find all those things. And I don't think that that statement necessarily adds anything to this section.
I had marked that sentence out myself, because I think the rest of it is fine.
Yeah, the rest of it is.
So remove the
So-
sentence, the town is currently studying the feasibility of the roundabout at Owl Creek and Brush Creek intersection.
Because that's almost obsolete now.
Well, it's current today, but it won't be in a year.
That's exactly right.
Right.
What, 34? 135? I'll tell you, something that jumps out at me is that chart on 135. And I'm
On
just saying.
135?
135. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is I have absolutely no difficulty with this chart. But look at that 2014, 2015 average traffic volume. And I can tell you it's getting worse in the winter months. So even though this has nothing to do with tonight's discussion on the comprehensive plan, I would suggest at some point we task our transportation department to give us a new measurement for this next winter. Of what
Oh,
that
because we're
we're already
we're
at this
now
rate.
3 winters,
Yeah.
3 winters back, right? Or 4 winters back.
And you could even do it people going to and from work in the morning and up and down Brush Creek. That's just me saying. How about the rest of you? You okay with that? We
I
begin.
think that's a good idea to get that kind of update. Particularly if we're gonna be talking about another roundabout.
We have the
can
number,
update.
we do
We
this,
can
we just,
update.
Yeah.
this is just, we've started this 2 years ago, so I'm sure they put the information in that's 2 years old.
It'd be
so.
good to see an updated chart. So,
Do we want to just add that then if we have the data?
okay, if you got the data, that'd be good.
And I'm gonna give you the 86% confidence level that we've got the data, but yes.
Okay.
86 and a half.
And if you don't, we can
We
task.
will get it,
We
but
will-
I am so confident we got it that,
I've seen it. 136.
Yeah, okay, 137, what is this?
I just had that space.
I have that marked
Okay.
up by A, purchase
Mhm.
A.
On the second paragraph on the right-hand side.
Yep.
Purchase A.
137,
Yeah,
another very interesting graph. That is concerning over time.
well, maybe if that one could be updated too, why not?
this one I know we have.
Okay,
Yeah, let's update. Just one question. There's on the the paragraph on the first column, the last 3 lines. The current routes connecting to the intercept lot also do not have the capacity to serve additional transit riders during peak time. Do we know that's accurate?
where are you?
Where are you reading?
On page 137,
Okay,
the left-hand column, the last 3 lines, starting with current routes.
Okay.
I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, that was my question.
No, that is true. During the peak times, there's, like, a bus will be totally full, they can't get enough people on it to get down to Intercept.
So you increase the frequency of the buses in, right?
Wasn't that what it's saying?
In 2016, we didn't have the 15-minute headways.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, I may be wrong, because during the winter months.
This is winter months, and we do
Oh,
have in
Raptor
winter, we
does
have 7
increase
minutes
the
service in
frequency.
winter months, and if you ride the bus in the winter, and you're on the Brush Creek, you know you're standing, and I think that's the point it's
exactly
trying to
right.
make, is that
We'd have to increase bus.
if you try and jump on the bus at 5:15 here, anywhere between 3:30 and
standing.
5:30,
Yep.
you're
It's
gonna
a
stand
standard.
up,
Okay.
and that's the only point I think it's
Okay.
trying to
Okay.
make.
All right,
We'd have to take dramatic efforts to increase the bus service, costing us more money.
so it's accurate,
Is
and
that a bus?
goes there.
Watch it. It's
Keep plugging.
I'm gonna change his mind yet. Okay, moving on to 137. Gee, I just did that one, 138.
Jeff,
139,
make your own
stormwater management.
Make your own damn good. So the rest of the job.
Okay, the town plan, the stormwater management, the town plans to allocate funds in future years to complete a stormwater inventory and assessment in order to implement some improvements to the stormwater system.
Yes,
Is it in this year's budget?
yes.
Oh,
But it's gonna be done in, I'm getting my budget years and my real years mixed up. It's gonna be done in 2019.
so why do we need this in here?
only to say that we are working towards it, I guess. I mean, you gotta remember, when this was originally written, it was in the beginning to say, yes, we've identified it and
just
we're
take
working towards it. Now it's an appendix,
Okay,
so.
you can take it out.
Well, we're never gonna solve our stormwater issue. I mean, we're only addressing one portion of it, right?
What do you mean?
This is just a
Well, it just
study.
says we're allocating funds in future years.
Right.
First, we have to study, and that's 2019. You don't know what you're gonna do with the study.
But isn't it an ongoing
Yes.
process?
Oh, okay.
I mean, we will hit different categorizations and we get stricter and stricter as we develop, and there's different standards for sure.
You know, just a question for Julianne. Earlier in the water management section, now we're on the stormwater, there's a reference to cisterns. How do those work?
Cisterns?
Yeah, how does that system work? I mean, I'm accustomed to cisterns on the farm,
Yeah.
but what is this concept?
We just put, just for an example, they just put a large cistern at the fire station site that would be able to collect the majority of the runoff that comes off of the new parking lot and runs to the end towards Anderson Ranch. And what it does is it contains the water, and then it slowly
Is it
drains out.
underground?
It's underground. They're underground,
Oh,
yeah.
not
It's
like,
very common around here where we have typically, not necessarily Snowmass, but in Aspen, they use it all the time because they have such small lots and no place to contain the stormwater off of their site, and so they use cisterns all the time.
oh. So it
And
doesn't
there's
freeze?
also fire cisterns that are up in the air typically for
yeah.
water pressure to put out a fire, but these cisterns are for stormwater.
Okay. Speaking of stormwater, do we have any area which I could not find in here on gray water management?
Did have something in there?
I thought we did, but I couldn't tell you.
I didn't,
It's under environmental.
just put a note there. That's just a
Okay.
question I had. I couldn't
So
find it.
check to see if we
Yeah,
have, we're
gray
addressed
water.
gray water.
Okay, moving on to page 140.
In other words, using gray water where
Yeah,
appropriate.
yeah. Because that's that's whole new policy and program that Picken County just adopted.
Well, and we have gray water on some of our parks and whatnot. We're
That's
ahead of
good
the
to
curve
know.
on some of those things.
Well, this is a whole different thing. You buy it for your home and your. Okay, Little Red's.
Yeah, Little Red
141.
Schoolhouse.
Wait, you jumped, where?
We're on
Oh,
141.
141, sorry, okay.
We got the
Currently,
nonprofit that operates Little Red Schoolhouse.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
took it out.
Yeah, I got that.
And
I
to
just took
change
out the
the,
last sentence.
Oh, but I
Took
took
out
it
what?
here.
I took it out because.
There were two currentlies, and we took one of the currentlies
Oh,
out.
okay. Nonprofit that currently operates.
Nonprofit that currently operates is.
Well,
I just took the whole thing.
we're suggesting to take the whole thing, the whole sentence out.
Because
It's gonna either happen or it won't happen.
I just put, your last sentence, demand demonstrated by a waiting list of up to 3 years at the facility shows a significant shortfall in childcare for local residents. And then I would have put something, additional facilities and/or space must be made available for childcare to accommodate our community. Growth in our childcare population in our community or something like that.
So write
But
it,
is that a policy? I mean,
write it in
that,
the affirmative?
Write it in the affirmative. Because I'm not
Additional childcare space should be explored,
Mhm.
something like that?
Yeah, something like that. To
Or just the
accommodate,
Yeah, the second part of that building, expanding the buildings to accommodate more children or possibly constructing new facility.
yeah. Okay, next is 142. 142. Okay, 143. $144,
Yeah, the second, under
Yeah.
fire and EMS,
yeah,
the second column, the
first one.
top of that second column, the temporary facilities have been relocated.
Take
So
that out.
They need to, that needs to come
They're
out.
moving real soon.
Yeah.
And you've changed the stuff on the school district, Julianne?
Who's say?
The school district stuff?
Yes. I
Educational
think-
facilities.
I think we have.
Yeah, we were changing.
Educational
Beat that up pretty good.
services is what I had.
143, I took out any pricing.
We took out what?
The pricing, the charges were 12,867 for water and 15,439 for,
Oh.
I'm going, so what?
So you want to strike that sentence?
Yeah. It's irrelevant to a comp plan. I would say once necessary fees are paid, district contacts the building department for permit release or something like that.
One thing I think we need to add under water,
Okay,
um,
water quality or water system.
well, it could be under, either, or maybe it's just under Snowmass Water and Sanitation District.
Okay, okay.
Where it says the district operation includes all components of the water and sewer systems, withdrawal, treatment, discharge. A big part of what they do is leak detection, and I think that that should be included. Discharge, leak detection, and collection and distribution systems.
Where are you on there?
At the top of 142,
Okay,
I think it makes the most sense to put it there.
oh, I see, yeah, that would make sense. Got it.
Does that work, Julianne?
Yes, I have.
Okay, we're over on page 144. I don't know what the new name of Snowmass Wildcat Fire Protection District is, but I know they have a new name.
They do?
Yeah, Roaring
Mhm,
Fork
but- Yeah,
Fire Protection District, I think
yeah,
it is.
Roaring Fork, yeah. So we just need to get the right name in here now.
I mean, it is still the Snowmass Wildcat Fire Protection District, but they have an IGA with the salt.
Oh, okay.
It's an authority, so the district is still the taxing
Okay.
authority over you.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 144.
So it's just the authority
Authority.
that oversees
The
both.
authority is new.
Okay, maybe we kind of referenced that.
Oh, it says it right there on the second column.
Yep, it is there, thank you. Thank you. So how relevant is paragraph 2
Where are you looking?
On what page?
of fire and districts, 144?
Okay.
If you're gonna put 2016 in, we need to put 2017.
Well, I just think probably the most important thing is the mutual aid agreements.
Pardon?
Probably the most important thing is just the mutual aid agreement.
Right.
That second part of the sentence. If you want to take out the number.
I mean, it's just a fact
It's
in time.
just a fact, yeah.
I don't think it hurts anything. I mean, again, it's up to you.
a little irrelevant.
So leave it or take it?
I think it's
Then I would
important.
like to see 2017 numbers in there.
Yeah, we can probably get 2017
Okay,
number too.
I would think you should be able to,
Replace that.
because obviously, with the growth of the town, we need to be having a system to monitor or receive reports on what the delta is. Okay, we got the Aspen the school systems and all that taken care of. Okay. 145. How about 146?
I think we made one change under telephone already. In this sentence, first column, first paragraph, halfway down, limited access to free wireless internet is provided by Skico in their mountain restaurants and in public spaces.
Oh, that's added to our list.
Okay.
We did that one
Yeah,
already?
we
No,
did
already
that one.
did it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, that's
147.
147.
Under the tourism department, I don't know, I guess I'd take out the last sentence.
That's what I did.
Composed of 18 employees and $6 million of tax.
I did the same thing. Okay, page 148, I had deleted.
The whole page?
Yeah, because, well.
Oh, sorry, this is the, yeah.
CPA.
It's the whole
I
section.
hadn't turned the page yet.
Yeah, it's really the whole section.
I think
That
those
whole
are,
appendix.
those are already pulled, right?
Yep. Yep, they were already.
So that's A3.
So that's A3 was taken.
Yeah.
A4. A4.
So, I'm sorry, so you want all of A3 removed?
Yep. And A4. Oh, man, boy, do I have a lot of stuff on here. Okay. We've already talked about walking paths, walkways, and trails. 157, the second sentence, these
Yeah.
recommendations may be implemented as funding allows.
So, wait, before you left 157, we're calling that title Walking Paths and Trails?
Walking paths,
The walkways.
walkways, and trails. I mean, this whole section is a connectivity plan. $158.
Well, hold on.
Oops, got more?
Yeah, 157. You said these recommendations may be implemented, okay? And then that next sentence, I would take out 2 of these recommendations are already under development, and the remainder, and I would just start, these opportunities are organized into high, medium, and low priorities, as shown in Table 12.
Are there? Oh, we got a long way to go.
Say that again?
I have it.
You got it?
So you start, these opportunities are
opportunities.
organized.
Yeah.
Into high, medium,
High,
and low
medium, and low.
priorities.
Okay, 158.
You got that space, Julianne, on
I have
158.
that.
I changed all the sidewalks
To
to
walkways.
walkways.
And the title?
Whoops, I have a yellow sticky over the title.
Just say pedestrian facility recommendations.
To enhance connectivity. Okay. And I had many questions on table 12, but we'll get into that at a later time when we begin to go back at that plan.
Are we taking out all the reference to the plan?
Because it
Oh.
hasn't been approved.
What?
It hasn't been approved.
But within,
Like on 160, it's like all over the page.
You're on 160?
Yeah, like, you know, draft community connectivity plan, it shows up in multiple spots.
but isn't that what this is?
Well, not the, I mean, the title of it is Transportation and Connectivity Background. I mean, yes, it is the plan, but I'm saying everywhere else you've wanted to take out reference to the connectivity plan, so I just didn't know if we want to make those changes in here. I mean, it does say draft.
Do we really need this whole section in here?
I think we do.
I think we've had so many discussions about crossings that it's important to keep it.
Other than that, this is not going to be used to advise anything on planning. I was going to debate some of these proposed facility recommendations, but I don't think we want to go there tonight.
Yeah, I haven't really read this stuff as probably as I should have.
Okay. 159. This is, was on 160.
Yeah. So on 160, the first column, first paragraph, the last sentence in that first paragraph would probably come out.
Where are you?
160, first column,
Yep,
first paragraph,
yep.
last sentence in that paragraph, starting, "These crossings have been studied and incorporated in."
Mm-hmm.
Wait, but that's what I was saying. This whole section is talking about the connectivity plan. So
Well-
it's the next paragraph too,
The next paragraph says the crossing recommendations,
right?
so
From the
forth and
draft
so on.
CCP.
So what you want to take that last sentence out of the first paragraph?
Yeah.
And then we could say the crossings from the,
And then
the crossings would,
we could even just say, starting that next sentence and say, "Some community members express concern."
Okay, page 162.
so that
Wait,
everyone's okay with taking that part out?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. And we're very prescriptive here. High visibility crosswalk markings in conjunction with advanced yield markings, pedestrian crossing signage, raised median curb extensions, etc. might be it assumes that it's going to happen with all of those. So high visibility, let's see.
Yeah, where are
Over on the last
Well,
paragraph.
It's just saying that it's giving the alternatives to the rapid blinking things, the rapid flashing beacons.
So I started it by high visibility, or I said options. I have the word
I see.
options on
You
mine.
took out the first sentence, right? Although RRBFs are a recommended improvement,
Other options might include.
yeah. You said high visibility, okay, other options might include, right?
Advanced yield markings, pedestrian crossing signage, raised mediums, curb extensions.
Yeah, but I mean, the whole paragraph above that is talking about the flashing beacons. So I don't feel like taking out that first sentence makes a difference. Because you're saying, even though this is recommended, here's these other options that could be just as effective if studied or looked into further.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think it's good to have the options in there.
Yeah, we need to have the options.
So leave it.
So leave it?
I would leave it.
Yeah, I would.
I just put the word options might include. Let's move on. Page 162.
Wait, can you go back to 161?
Oops.
161, just in that, well, we talked about that period at the end of the sentence, but in that second paragraph, or the paragraph on the right-hand side, it says sidewalks and/or walking paths. Did you guys want to change that to just walking paths? You see it,
Sure.
Julianne?
Yep.
It says such as sidewalks and/or walking paths, because you changed all the other stuff to walking
Right.
paths.
You're right. Or walkways, either way.
Yeah.
Yep. 162.
The, e-assist is spelled wrong.
Huh?
E-assist is spelled wrong.
Oh.
It's missing an S.
We're catching up, sorry.
Hold on.
Say that again?
What page?
You know,
162?
I've told you before, 162, top paragraph on the right, e-assist is spelled wrong.
That's on our list.
Yeah.
Okay. 161. $162.
Can I ask a question? Can we go back to the e-assist again one more time?
Sure.
That, since we did this, plan originally, we've since allowed the electric bikes on the paths. Do we need to somehow incorporate that in here? What is currently allowed
That's a good idea.
within Snowmass?
I think that's
In
Or else
accordance
have a
with what
map or
Pickens
something.
County has done? We just might want to say what we did this summer.
Well, this almost assumed they're allowed, but we can,
Right, and we just because this was done way before we made that policy this summer.
so we can just say currently e-bikes are allowed on all hard surface
Right.
paths.
Yeah, but I would say which kind of e-bikes.
Yeah.
And, specifically call it the hard surface.
Class 1 hard surface
Yeah.
trails.
Okay, on page 162. How about 163? Oh, page 163, on the second column, the very last paragraph. For example, the town of Summit, New Jersey has implemented a pilot program. I could care less. Sorry. Page 164. I didn't have anything. 165.
Was this taken directly out of the poster plan? This section's probably.
The bullet number 2, raise my eyebrows. Provide latitude and policy to consider other opportunities for open space acquisition that's, the community development may take advantage of unique circumstances to set aside parcels for future consideration. That was, to me, clear as mud.
Well, that makes me think of the school site, which we've kind of changed the designation there.
Well, I thought this said we would be looking for other open space. But I don't know what it says because I don't know what it means. Yeah, that's what, the first thing that I thought when I reread this. But then I started to go, what are you talking about? Other open space? That's,
I mean, the way I read it is, open space is a priority, and don't restrict yourselves to the rules in place if we need to take advantage of something, if there's a critical spot that comes open.
what would that include?
What would that include? I have no idea, but that's what this is saying, that throughout this document, we talk about open space being critical, and if there's an opportunity to acquire some, look at it.
Yeah, if you can acquire some. But the way you said it, it sounds as though you could build on it.
I think it's the opposite. I mean, this is all under open space.
Okay.
It's like, let's acquire
Okay.
as much open space as possible.
Okay. Then why don't we say it the way it? Look for opportunities to acquire open space.
Provide latitude and policy to consider other opportunities for open space acquisition. So basically, don't stick to the rules if you don't need to.
Well, the first bullet says, look for opportunities for new open space.
Okay, so then why did you need?
Why do we need the second bullet?
That's correct. Take 2 out, just go with 1. Okay. Anything else on that page? 166. So I have a big 2 words on my page called the dog park. Whatever happened to the dog park?
On which page?
On page 166. There's no reference to dog park, and that was big in the,
I don't think that was in the I'd have to reread the poster plan, but I remember it said it's an idea, but I don't remember it being a.
there was a whole little trail with wooded trees and was 1 to 2 miles long.
We have one?
No, that was proposed in the poster plan. And there was even a sketch of one. I saw a pretty picture.
The poster plan's 180 pages. I don't remember every recommendation in the poster plan.
I do remember the dog park.
I don't argue, but.
Can you take a look at that?
So it would just be and make sure that.
Consideration of building a dog park, or something like that.
It's essentially a place for you to take your dog off leash.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was a 1 or 2 mile kind of an open space type through the trees, and it was.
But you'd
fenced.
want that underneath 6.1.
I don't care where you put it.
Because I mean, it'd be a park type goal, right?
Yeah. 167. We have no recommendations. 168. 169 is blank. That's it. 170.
And the planning commission just recommended pulling this whole
I
thing, right?
agree, because this is not a good, doesn't really
Fine.
reflect.
Fine with me.
We can talk about it early.
So
Okay.
That takes us to 178.
178. And that is the build-out charge.
Yeah. And I have a addition on the build-out chart was to add Capitol Peak and Hayden,
Yep.
so wherever they fit in this.
Okay.
That should be the end.
They're included in base village lots 1 to 3.
Where's that?
Sorry, 1 to
Oh.
9
On page 180.
on 180.
Where?
Page 180, the
Page
top of the
180,
chart.
they're in base village lots.
1.
Oh.
Maybe-
It's all put together there.
Well,
Can you do a little, something underneath that, make that a larger cell and put like a dot, put capital P K?
Or just put a footnote or something.
Yeah, that's fine.
yeah, just footnote them, something.
Okay.
But wait a minute. So
Just
if you're
put a
gonna do
footnote where it
Hayden, you're gonna
includes.
do Hayden, Capital Peak.
Well, I think you just put a footnote and
Viceroy.
says lots 1 through 9 include, and put what that includes.
Just put a footnote. Can you do that?
You know what I'm saying? Like includes Capitol Peak, Hayden, whatever else it includes.
Lumen, Snowmass 1,
Right.
Snowmass 2, Building
All of-
11, Building
all of
12.
Yeah, I
so
would just list the
13,
residential that it
It's gonna
includes.
be,
That's a long
it's a pretty
footnote.
long,
Well,
Well,
I mean, at least people understand what that means.
so there are certain,
it's called base village,
I
period.
think that if you're responding, if I may, I think that if you're responding to the email about Hayden being included, they were wanting to make sure that their affordable housing units were included, which they are, in this base village employee housing number.
You know, I'm fine with what you said. I don't think we need to put all this detail, because it's available.
And the only reason this is included, the land use code refers to this,
Refers
that's why,
to it.
Right,
and it needs
that's
to
the way
be,
the land use code.
right, right.
So you're just leaving it.
yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So in the event that we make changes to the land use code,
Yeah.
this might likely come out
Or
at some,
just- or become obsolete.
become obsolete, in other words.
Okay.
Ugh.
Anyone else on page 181?
Can we close
How
the
about
book?
page 182?
How about we close the book?
How about that pretty picture?
I like 182. Let's keep it.
Thank you. Okay, we're done.
Oh my God.
So you can continue, if you'd like,
We'll continue the public hearing on November the 4th, and if you could, 5th, and if you could please send out a new version. The meeting on the 5th will start at 4 p.m.
yeah, and
So you want us to go essentially back to the red mark that we had been working on and include all these new additional changes, but still keep the list as an attachment? Or do you think that the list won't be necessary
I don't think
for
the list will be
ordinance
necessary. I
purposes?
think if you just give us one final red line, do
Okay.
it red line or just,
I
yeah,
think
let's do red
is
line,
helpful.
and not all the list.
and I'm gonna speak out of school on this little, this is done in a fancy program that I envision. So, worst case, if it's not ready, we'll just show up and say it's not ready. It
Okay,
needs to be
that's
done in
fine.
a program that we don't necessarily operate in. But if we continue to the 5th, if we can deliver, we will. And so we would recommend first reading on the 5th. And that way you guys can look at it. At that point, you'd have 2 readings,
I
obviously.
think we can. I think we can. I do want to thank all members of council and staff for spending hours and hours on this document, and to our planning commission, who worked tirelessly on the document as well. So, good job.
Big project.
Now it's 7:35. I'll see if there are any other comments from town council members. If not, I'll call for adjournment.
No comments here.
I had a Nordic Council meeting last week. We're still working on our snowmaking program for the winter, which should take place up at AVSC. So we're hopefully moving forward on that. The other comment I'd like to make is that I went to a meeting at the school the other night. There has been a lot of attention given to vaping products that are being used in the school. I met with a lady there, and I'm going to forward you guys the correspondence that I've had with her. But I think that we should consider raising the age to purchase tobacco or vaping products in Snowmass Village to 21. Aspen has done that. It's called Tobacco 21. I don't believe there are any places in the village to buy vaping, whatever they are.
Well, there will be.
But there may be.
There will be.
So I think that we should just make it very clear that 21 is the age limit in Snowmass Village, and we should draft an ordinance accordingly.
Basalt also has an ordinance.
And the other piece of that is raising the tax on tobacco or nicotine products, which would mean we would forego the state tax, but we would collect our own tax, and it can be upwards of $4 or $5 a pack, I believe it is. I don't know the exact terminology, but I think that that's something that we should include in our regulations.
I have no problems with any of the above.
Let us do a little homework for you. I just know when we've talked to Aspen, just so you see the other side, they have not seen the use of tobacco sales go down at all. And so the concern that gets presented is it ends up being a tax on the poor. People that can't go otherwise go someplace else to buy cigarettes. I can't speak to the vaping, but they haven't seen a decrease in consumption.
Really?
And I just put that out there as like, what, I understand the goal, and I mean, is it gonna be effective? Just something to think about.
Well, what the kids tell me is that because there's a tax and an age limit in Aspen, they go to the ABC. So I think we just need to plug the holes so that we're all kind of, you know.
And that would be the age limit. It's the tax issue that I'm speaking to.
Okay.
I mean, something just to consider, but we can pull some homework together on it. And
Well, I'll forward this information to you guys.
Lisa,
and
who
we
you're
can,
talking to?
yeah.
Thank you so very much. Alyssa, anything? Or, I think everybody's busted.
I don't think so. I mean, I have other meetings coming up this month, Sister Cities in Northwest Cog and things like that, but I can't think of anything else at the time.
Okay. Can I call for adjournment?
Moved.
Second.
All in support.
Aye.
Aye.
Ah.